ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಕುಳಿತುಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಮಿನಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿನೂ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಟೇಪ್ ಕಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಆನಂತರ ಸ್ಟಾಲ್ ವಿಸಿಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ ನಂತರ ಇಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಬರ್ತಾರೆ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೆಯುವಂತಹ ಎಲ್ಲ ವಿದ್ಯಮಾನಗಳನ್ನು ತಾವು ನೋಡಬಹುದು. ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಂ ಸ್ಟಾಲ್ಗೆ ವಿಸಿಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದರ ವಿವರಣೆಯನ್ನು ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥಾಪಕ ನಿರ್ದೇಶಕರು ಹಾಗೂ ಎಲ್ಲ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳು ಅವರಿಗೆ ನೀಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಈ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಎಲ್ಲ ಎಕ್ಸಿಬಿಟರ್ ಸ್ಟಾಲ್ಗಳನ್ನು ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಚಿವರು ವೀಕ್ಷಣೆ ಮಾಡಿ ನಂತರ ಇಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಆಗಮಿಸುವಂತಹ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಇದೆ. Well, ladies and gentlemen, he would visit all the stalls provided by the other stakeholders, and then we'll come to the ballroom. ಹೊರಗಡೆ ನಿಮಗೆಲ್ಲ ಗೊತ್ತಿರೋ ಹಾಗೆ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕಲಿ ವೆಹಿಕಲ್ಸ್ ಮುಖೇನ ಪರಿಸರ ಸ್ನೇಹಿ ಈ ವಾಹನಗಳನ್ನು ಟಾಟಾ ಹಾಗೂ ಇತರ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗಳದ್ದು ವೀಕ್ಷಣೆಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿ ಇದು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಕಾರ್ಯವನ್ನು ನಿರ್ವಹಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದರ ಮಾಹಿತಿಯನ್ನು ಪಡೆದು ದಿ ಆನರಬಲ್ ಮಿನಿಸ್ಟರ್ ವಿಲ್ ಕಮ್ ಹಿಯರ್. ಬಂಧುಗಳೇ, ಇದೀಗ ಇಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಆಗಮಿಸುತ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಚಿವರಾದ ಶ್ರೀ ವಿ ಸುನಿಲ್ ಕುಮಾರ್. ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಸ್ವಾಗತವನ್ನು ಕೋರೋಣ. ಲೆಟ್ಸ್ ವೆಲ್ಕಮ್ ದಿ ಆನರಬಲ್ ಮಿನಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಆಫ್ ಎನರ್ಜಿ, ಕನ್ನಡ ಅಂಡ್ ಕಲ್ಚರ್, ಶ್ರೀ ವಿ ಸುನಿಲ್ ಕುಮಾರ್. ಬಂಧುಗಳೇ, ನಮ್ಮ ರಾಜ್ಯದ ಸತ್ಸಂಪ್ರದಾಯದಂತೆ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಇಂಧನ ಸಚಿವರು ಕನ್ನಡ ಮತ್ತು ಸಂಸ್ಕೃತಿ ಸಚಿವರು ಆಗಿರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ನಮ್ಮ ರಾಜ್ಯದ ಸತ್ಸಂಪ್ರದಾಯದಂತೆ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದ ಆರಂಭದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾಡಗೀತೆಯೊಂದಿಗೆ ಆರಂಭಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ. ಐ ವುಡ್ ರಿಕ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ ಆಲ್ ಆಫ್ ಯು ಟು ಕೈಂಡ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಅಪ್ ಫಾರ್ ದ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ಆಂಥಮ್. ಜಯ ಭಾರತ ಜನನಿಯ ತನುಜಾತೆ, ಜಯ ಹೇ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಮಾತೆ. I'll request all of you to kindly sit down. Well, as we are all aware, today is a very important day in terms of Karnataka taking another step. Karnataka ಈ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಇಡೀ ದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ಮಾದರಿಯಾಗುವಂತಹ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ ಮೊಬಿಲಿಟಿನಲ್ಲಿಯೂ ಸಹ ಮುಂಚೂಣಿಯಲ್ಲಿದೆ. ಆರಂಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಚಿವರ ಅನಿಸಿಕೆಗಳನ್ನು ಒಂದು ವಿಡಿಯೋ ಮುಖೇನ ನಾವು ಅರಿತುಕೊಳ್ಳೋಣ. ಅನಂತರ ವೇದಿಕೆ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಆರಂಭ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ವಿಡಿಯೋ ಪ್ಲೀಸ್.
ನಮಸ್ತೆ. ನಾಡಿನಾದ್ಯಂತ ವಾಹನಗಳ ದಟ್ಟಣೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ವಿದ್ಯುತ್ ವಾಹನಗಳ ಬಳಕೆಯನ್ನ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಬಳಸಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು ಇವತ್ತು ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಪ್ರಮಾಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಜನಾಭಿಪ್ರಾಯ ನಿರ್ಮಾಣ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರೋದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಗಮನಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ. ಈ ಹಿನ್ನೆಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ವಿದ್ಯುತ್ ವಾಹನದ ಬಳಕೆಗೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಸವಲತ್ತನ್ನು ಕೊಡಬೇಕು, ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಒತ್ತನ್ನು ಕೊಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು ನಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರದು ಕೂಡ ಇರಾದೆ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಈ ಹಿನ್ನೆಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇಂಧನ ಇಲಾಖೆ ವಿಶೇಷವಾದಂಥ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನಗಳನ್ನ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಸಂದರ್ಭಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ವಿದ್ಯುತ್ ಶಕ್ತಿ ನಿಯಂತ್ರಣದ ರೀಚಾರ್ಜ್ ಅನ್ನ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಂ ಅನ್ನ ನೋಡಲ್ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಯಾಗಿ ಇವತ್ತು ನೇಮಿಸಿಕೊಂಡು ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಮಿನ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ರೀಚಾರ್ಜಿಂಗ್ ಸೆಂಟರ್ಗಳನ್ನು ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಪ್ರಮಾಣದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ. ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ 172 ಸ್ಥಳಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ರೀಚಾರ್ಜಿಂಗ್ ಸೆಂಟರ್ಗಳನ್ನು ನಾವು ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ಬೇಡಿಕೆಗಳು ಬರ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂಥ ಹಿನ್ನೆಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ವಿದ್ಯುತ್ ವಾಹನಗಳು ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂಥ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಬಜೆಟ್ನಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಉಲ್ಲೇಖ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ, ಈ ವರ್ಷ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ವಿದ್ಯುತ್ ರೀಚಾರ್ಜಿಂಗ್ ಸೆಂಟರ್ಗಳನ್ನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತೇಳಿ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯ ಹೆದ್ದಾರಿಗಳು, ಪಟ್ಟಣ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳು, ಪ್ರವಾಸೋದ್ಯಮದ ಕೇಂದ್ರಗಳು, ಈ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕೇಂದ್ರಗಳನ್ನು ಗಮನದಲ್ಲಿಟ್ಟುಕೊಂಡು ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಾದ್ಯಂತ ಈ ವರ್ಷ 1,000 ರೀಚಾರ್ಜಿಂಗ್ ಸೆಂಟರ್ಗಳನ್ನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವಂಥ ಯೋಚನೆಯನ್ನ ನಾವು ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಂ ಈ ನೋಡಲ್ ಏಜೆನ್ಸಿ ಆಗಿದ್ದುಕೊಂಡು 10 ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಗಳು ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡಿದೆ. ನಾನು ಜನರಿಗೆ ವಿನಂತಿಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ, ಪರಿಸರದ ಕುರಿತಂತೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಪ್ರಮಾಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಜಾಗೃತಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂಥ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ವಿದ್ಯುತ್ ವಾಹನದ ಬಳಕೆಯನ್ನ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಮಾಡುವಂತಾಗಬೇಕು. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕಾದಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂಥ ಸಹಕಾರವನ್ನ ಸರ್ಕಾರವೂ ಕೊಡುತ್ತೆ. ಇಂಧನ ಇಲಾಖೆಯ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಮೂಲಭೂತವಾದಂಥ ಸೌಕರ್ಯಗಳನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಇವತ್ತು ಒದಗಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ. 1 ಯೂನಿಟ್ನ ರೀಚಾರ್ಜ್ ಸೆಂಟರಿಗೆ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಕಡಿಮೆ ರೂಪದಲ್ಲಿ 5 ರೂಪಾಯಿಯನ್ನ ನಾವು ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಚಾರ್ಜ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ. ಇದರ ಸದುಪಯೋಗವನ್ನ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದ ಜನ ಪಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವಂಥ ವಿನಂತಿಯನ್ನು ನಾನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ.
BESCOM ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಯು ಚಾರ್ಜಿಂಗ್ ಸೌಕರ್ಯದಿಂದ ವಿದ್ಯುತ್ ಚಾಲಿತ ವಾಹನಗಳಿಗೆ ಉತ್ತೇಜನ ನೀಡಿ ಜನರಿಗೆ ವಿದ್ಯುತ್ ವಾಹನಗಳ ಬಳಕೆಯ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹ ನೀಡುತ್ತಿದೆ. ಸಾರ್ವಜನಿಕರ ನೆರವಿಗಾಗಿ ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಂ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ನಗರಾದ್ಯಂತ ಡಿಸಿ ಚಾರ್ಜಿಂಗ್ ಸ್ಟೇಷನ್ ಹಾಗೂ ಎಸಿ ಚಾರ್ಜಿಂಗ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ಗಳನ್ನು ಸ್ಥಾಪಿಸಿದೆ.
ನೀವು ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಂನ RFID ಟ್ಯಾಗ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದ್ರಿಂದ ನಿಮ್ಮ ರೀಚಾರ್ಜ್ ಇನ್ನೂ ಸುಲಭವಾಗುತ್ತೆ.
ಬೇರೆ ನಗರಗಳಿಗೆ ಹೋಲಿಸಿದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ನಗರದಲ್ಲಿ ಚಾರ್ಜಿಂಗ್ ಶುಲ್ಕ ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಈ ಸಂಚಾರವನ್ನ ಮುಂದಿನ ದಿನಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಮಾಡೋಕೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಬಯಸ್ತಿದೆ.
ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ ವೆಹಿಕಲ್ ಬಳಸೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಪ್ರತಿ ಕಿಲೋಮೀಟರ್ಗೆ ಬರೀ 70 ಪೈಸೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಖರ್ಚು ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ. ನಿಮಗ್ ಗೊತ್ತಾ, ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಂ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಯ ಮೊಬೈಲ್ ಆಪ್ ಕೂಡ ಇದೆ. ಇದ್ರ ಮೂಲಕ ನೀವು ಚಾರ್ಜಿಂಗ್ ಸೌಲಭ್ಯಗಳನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಪಡ್ಕೋಬಹುದು.
ಇದರಿಂದ ನಾವು ಹಣ ಉಳಿತಾಯ ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲದೆ ಪರಿಸರವನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಸಂರಕ್ಷಿಸಬಹುದು.
ಈ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ ಆಟೋಗಳನ್ನ ಓಡಿಸೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಡ್ರೈವರ್ಗಳು ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಟ್ರಿಪ್ಸ್ಗಳನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಹಣನ ಸಂಪಾದನೆ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. ಈ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ ಆಟೋಗಳನ್ನ ಬಳಸೋದ್ರಿಂದ ವಾಯು ಮಾಲಿನ್ಯ ಹಾಗೂ ಶಬ್ದ ಮಾಲಿನ್ಯನ ತಡೆಗಟ್ಟಬಹುದು.
ಯೋಚಿಸಿ, 1 ಕಿಲೋಮೀಟರ್ಗೆ ಕೇವಲ 25 ಪೈಸೆ ಖರ್ಚು ಮಾಡಿ ನೀವು ಜವಾಬ್ದಾರಿಯುತ ನಾಗರಿಕರಾಗಬಹುದು.
ನಾನು 200 ರೂಪಾಯಿಗೆ ಕಾರ್ ಚಾರ್ಜ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಸಾಕು, ನಾನು 200 ಕಿಲೋಮೀಟರ್ ಪ್ರಯಾಣ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು.
ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಅಲ್ಲ, ನಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರಯಾಣಿಕರು ಕೂಡ ಈ ಶಬ್ದರಹಿತ ಆಟೋದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತು ಸುಖಕರವಾದ ಪ್ರಯಾಣವನ್ನ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು.
ಸಾರಿಗೆ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ರೂಪಾಂತರಗೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ನಾವು ಸಿದ್ಧರಾಗಬೇಕಷ್ಟೇ.
ವಿದ್ಯುತ್ ಚಾಲಿತ ವಾಹನಗಳಿಗೆ ಸರ್ಕಾರದಿಂದ ರಿಯಾಯಿತಿ ಹಾಗೂ ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹಧನ ಪಡೆಯಬಹುದು. ಬಿ ಎ ಸ್ಮಾರ್ಟ್ ಪರ್ಸನ್. ವಿದ್ಯುತ್ ವಾಹನಗಳನ್ನ ಬಳಸಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಮುಂದಿನ ಪೀಳಿಗೆಗೂ ಪರಿಸರ ಉಳಿಸಿ.
ಈ ಸಂಚಾರಕ್ಕೆ ಚಾಲನೆ, ನಮ್ಮ ಪರಿಸರದ ಪಾಲನೆ.
ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಅವಧಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಚಾರ್ಜ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಪ್ರಯಾಣ ಮಾಡಿ.
ಈ ವಿಡಿಯೋನ ನೋಡಿ ಬಹುಶಃ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗಿರಬಹುದು. ಇದು ಸಾರ್ವಜನಿಕರಿಗೆ ತಲುಪಬೇಕು, ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಜನತೆಗೆ ತಲುಪಿದಾಗ ಮಾತ್ರ ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಂ ಹಾಗೂ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸ್ಟೇಕ್ ಹೋಲ್ಡರ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡುವಂತಹ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಸಫಲ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಇನ್ನು ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಟೈಮ್ ನೌ ಟು ಕಾಲ್ ದ ಡಿಗ್ನಿಟರೀಸ್ ಆನ್ ದ ಡಯಾಸ್. ಆನ್ ಬಿಹಾಫ್ ಆಫ್ ಆಲ್ ಆಫ್ ಅಸ್, ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಮೈ pleasure to request the Honourable Minister Shri V Sunill Kumar to kindly come over. ದಯಮಾಡಿ ಗೌರವಾನ್ವಿತ ಸಚಿವರು ವೇದಿಕೆಗೆ ಆಗಮಿಸಬೇಕಾಗಿ ವಿನಂತಿ. ಅವರಿಗೆ ಈ ಸಸಿ ಮತ್ತು ಪುಸ್ತಕ ಎರಡೂ ಸಹ ಮಾನವ ಜನಾಂಗಕ್ಕೆ ಒಳ್ಳೆಯದು. ಒಂದು ಸಸಿಯ ಮುಖೇನ ಪರಿಸರ ಬೆಳೆಯುತ್ತೆ, ಹಾಗೆ ಪುಸ್ತಕದ ಮುಖೇನ ಜ್ಞಾನಾರ್ಜನೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸ್ವಾಗತ ಸರ್. ಇನ್ನು ವೇದಿಕೆಗೆ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಶ್ರೀ ಜಿ ಕುಮಾರ್ ನಾಯಕ್ ಅವರು, ಅಡಿಷನಲ್ ಚೀಫ್ ಸೆಕ್ರೆಟರಿ ಎನರ್ಜಿ, ಗವರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ. ಐ ವುಡ್ ರಿಕ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ ಯು ಟು ಕೈಂಡ್ಲಿ ಕಮ್ ಓವರ್. I would now request Mr. Rajendra Cholan, the Managing Director of BESCOM, to kindly come to the stage and take your seat, please. ಇದಾದ ನಂತರ I would also request Mr. Reji Kumar Pillai, the President of ISGF, Chairman GSF, to kindly come over. I would request Mr. Chetan Maini, the co-founder of Sun Mobility, to kindly come over. ಹಾಗೇನೆ ಭಾರತ ಪ್ರೇಮಿ, ದೂರದ ಅಮೆರಿಕದಿಂದ ಬಂದಿರುವಂತಹ ಶ್ರೀ ಭರತ್ ಅವರು ಸಹ ವೇದಿಕೆಗೆ ಆಗಮಿಸಬೇಕಾಗಿ ವಿನಂತಿ. ಐ ವುಡ್ ರಿಕ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ ಮಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಭರತ್ ಟು ಕೈಂಡ್ಲಿ ಕಮ್ ಓವರ್. ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ಬಂಧುಗಳೇ, ಈ ದಿನದ ಈ ವಿಶೇಷ ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರ ಅನೇಕ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂತಹ ವರ್ಕ್ಶಾಪ್ಸ್ ಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಇಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ ಮೊಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ಮೊಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರ ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಂ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು ಇಡೀ ದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ಮಾದರಿ ಅಂತಿದೆ. ತಮಗೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಈ ದಿನದ ಈ ವಿಶೇಷ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ನಿರೂಪಕನಾದ ನಾನು ಶಂಕರ್ ಪ್ರಕಾಶ್ ಆದರದ ಹೃತ್ಪೂರ್ವಕ ಸ್ವಾಗತವನ್ನ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ. ವೆರಿ ಹಾರ್ಟಿ ವೆಲ್ಕಮ್ ಟು ಆಲ್ ಆಫ್ ಯು, ಲೇಡೀಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಜೆಂಟಲ್ಮನ್. At this juncture, I would request the Honourable Minister and the dignitaries to kindly come forward and light the lamp to signal the beginning of a new era in the history of Namma Karnataka. ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ರಾಜ್ಯದ ಇತಿಹಾಸದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಹೊಸ ಅಧ್ಯಾಯವನ್ನ ಬರೆಯುವಂತಹ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ದೀಪವನ್ನ ಬೆಳಗಿಸೋದ್ರ ಮುಖೇನ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಚಿವರಾದ ಶ್ರೀ ವಿ ಸುನಿಲ್ ಕುಮಾರ್ ಅವರು ಹಾಗೂ ಎಲ್ಲ ಗಣ್ಯರು ಸಚಿವರ ಜೊತೆ ಇದ್ದು ದೀಪವನ್ನ ಬೆಳಗಿಸಿ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಂಪ್ರದಾಯಿಕ ಚಾಲನೆಯನ್ನ ನೀಡಬೇಕಾಗಿ ವಿನಂತಿ. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the objective of this workshop is to understand the views of the industry so that the new policies and programs for rapid scaling up of electric mobility in Karnataka can be formulated to meet the expectations of the industry and the government. Please put your hands together in unison.
निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा. वक्रतुण्ड महाकाय सूर्यकोटि समप्रभ निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा.
I would now request the Honourable Minister to kindly water the plant. ಸಸಿಗೆ ನೀರು ಎರೆಯೋದ್ರ ಮುಖೇನ ಈ ಪರಿಸರ ಸ್ನೇಹಿ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಚಿವರು ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಂ ಸಹ ಪರಿಸರ ಸ್ನೇಹಿ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಮರಿಬಾರದು ಅನ್ನುವಂತಹ ಸಂದೇಶವನ್ನು ಸಹ ರವಾನಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಕನ್ಸೋಲ್ ಪ್ಲೀಸ್, ವೆನ್ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಸ್ಪೀಕಿಂಗ್ ರೆಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ದ ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್. ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಚಿವರು ಹಾಗೂ ಎಲ್ಲ ಗಣ್ಯರಿಗೂ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have with us Mr. Reji Kumar Pillai, who is the president of India Smart Grid Forum and also the chairman of the Global Smart Energy Federation since November 2016. More importantly, he has got more than 4 decades of experience and he has dedicated himself so that technology can be leveraged to transform the electric grid in India and provide clean and reliable electricity to every citizen. ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಬ್ಬ ನಾಗರಿಕನಿಗೂ ಕೈಗೆಟುಕುವ ಬೆಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅತ್ಯುತ್ತಮವಾಗಿರತಕ್ಕಂತ ಈ ಒಂದು ಇಂಧನವನ್ನ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದೇ ಅವರ ಆಶಯ. At the outset, I would request Shri Reji Kumar Pillai for the opening remarks and welcome address. ಬಂಧುಗಳೇ, ಸ್ವಾಗತಿಸಿ ಶ್ರೀ ರೆಜಿ ಕುಮಾರ್ ಪಿಳ್ಳೈ.
Honourable Minister Shri V Sunill Kumar, Additional Chief Secretary Energy Shri Kumar Naik, Managing Director of BESCOM Shri Rajendra Cholan, Mr. Chetan Maini and Mr. Bharat Kumar, and all dignitaries in the audience. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all for this workshop on electric mobility. And we are honored to be a knowledge partner with BESCOM in organizing this workshop today. India Smart Grid Forum is a public-private partnership initiative of Ministry of Power, and our mandate is to assist electric utilities, regulators and policymakers in appropriate policies and programs for electric grid modernization and energy transition. We are operational for, can you go to the next slide? We are operational for about 10 years now, started from 2011 by Ministry of Power. It's a member-based organization. We are proud that BESCOM was one of the founding members of India Smart Grid Forum. And we have been, all these years, we have been working very closely with the BESCOM, and particularly because Karnataka have been one of the most progressive states in technology adoption, irrespective of the changes in political parties, governments, officers, the development agenda continued uninterrupted in Karnataka, and electric mobility also. Karnataka was the first state which issued a policy in 2017 that energy storage and electric vehicle policy, and maximum electric vehicle charging points today we have in Bangalore city. And that policy also envisioned to make Bangalore the EV capital of India. So we work on different areas. Many of you don't know as much, but we have been working on the electric mobility space right from the beginning, strictly going by the Indian Electricity Act 2003. Selling electricity can be done only by the distribution companies like BESCOM. Those who have a license only can sell electricity. And setting up a charging station by a private agency or any third party, buying electricity from the DISCOM and selling it to an electric vehicle is strictly going by the Indian Electricity Act, not permitted. This issue we have flagged off with the Ministry of Power, and changing an act, Electricity Act, in the Parliament takes long time. So finally in 2018, after several brainstorming sessions, Ministry of Power issued an order that sale of electricity from a charger to a car is not as a sale actually, but it is a transformation of electrical energy into chemical energy, and by which it has actually brought in private players in setting up charging stations. And thereafter, we've been advocating for green number plates, all new large buildings and campuses to have mandatory 20% parking spaces fitted with electric vehicle charging infrastructure at the beginning itself. That will not make much of a difference in the cost of the entire infrastructure. But in an existing building, if you have to spend few million rupees, it becomes a major issue. Who will spend? So these are all these things have been accepted and adopted by Government of India over the years. The most important one was that in 2017 onwards, we have been advocating two-wheeler and three-wheeler should be sold without batteries. The battery cost is more than 50% of the cost of a three-wheeler or a two-wheeler. And if it is treated as fuel, the battery is treated as fuel, by which a three-wheeler driver is able to rent a charged battery every day morning. Like today, he put 500 rupee fuel and run 100, 150 kilometer around the day. Same way, 100, 150 rupees, he should be able to rent a charged battery. This has been last year, finally, Ministry of Road Transport has accepted. We will see a lot of new businesses coming up, all cities, battery leasing and battery renting services. And cost of electric mobility for a three-wheeler, two-wheeler will come down by 50% because when you buy a vehicle without battery, it is much cheaper and it can really usher in a revolution. So next slide, please. We had issued several reports all on our website, as well as some of them are displayed in our booth. Next one. Sorry, I won't take much time, but next one, please. Yeah, 100 years ago, there were electric vehicles. Those were big electric vehicles were run with lead acid batteries. These batteries used to be heavy. It used to take long time to charge, and it had limited range. But still, a lot of investment, research, development happened in 1900s. But during the First World War, the internal combustion engine technology has made rapid progress. It became cheaper. It became easy to assemble in factories. And after 1920s or 1930s, everybody forgotten about this particular development. And the second birth of electric vehicle, we can consider it as the Prius, Toyota Prius, which was launched in 1997. That had a small battery. It was not even grid connected. It's a hybrid vehicle while you drive with charges. In early 2000s, 2003, 2004, a plug-in hybrid electric vehicles came in. Same Toyota Prius, you can plug in and charge it. That also had a very small battery. Reason being, those days batteries used to be $4,000 per kilowatt hour in the early 2000s. The real second birth of electric vehicles considered to be Tesla, which launched an electric vehicle in 2008. and followed by Nissan and a couple of other manufacturers around the world. Even that time, 2009, 2010, we take it as the beginning of the new era of electric vehicle. That time also, a battery was about $1,100 per kilowatt hour. And today it stands at $130 per kilowatt hour. It has come down by more than 90% in the last 10 years. In this revolution of this electric vehicle, it took almost 6-7 years for the first 1 million vehicle to be on the road. When I talk about vehicle here, I'm talking only about four-wheelers, not about the electric rickshaws which are there in Delhi and many parts of North India. So it took almost 7 years. By December 2017, we had about 1 million electric vehicle cars and buses on the roads around the world. And the next million was added in less than 1 year. The third million was added in 8 months. And today, as I speak, the electric vehicle stock stands close to 8 million. So, and this is going to go at much rapid pace. Next slide, please. I would like to bring to your attention about an article in a school magazine written by Shashikant Verma, who was a 9th class student in one of the schools in Bengal. He will be speaking today afternoon a special address. So he talked about, this article talks about 50 years down the line. This is published in 1985. 50 years down the line in 2035, even the Emir of Kuwait, the King of Kuwait, will find it extremely expensive to drive a regular car because petrol will become so expensive. We were talking about the oil will be running out. Whether oil running out or not, electric vehicle is going to take over from the IC engine-based vehicle. So Mr. Shashikant Verma today is one of the recognized leaders on electric mobility. He is the Director for Strategy and Chief Technology Officer at Transport for London in UK. He will be addressing this workshop in the afternoon today. Next slide, please. This talks about, just look at it. All major electric vehicle manufacturers, they have announced that by 2025, by 2030, it's all going to be electric. Even Government of India also has a very ambitious electric mobility program. 2013, we launched a electric mobility mission plan, and FAME 1, FAME 2, through these programs, we are promoting electric mobility. And I will stop by mentioning about a small example of Shenzhen city, sir. So Shenzhen city in China is the only city in the world where all public transport, all buses are electric. In 2016 December, they achieved 100% electrification of public buses in Shenzhen city, 16,500 buses, electric buses. And this is at a time when the entire North America had less than 1,000 electric buses. Entire Western Europe had less than 2,000 electric buses. Shenzhen city alone had 16,500 electric buses. We went to study and we came back and published many reports about the electric vehicle revolution in Shenzhen. The main thing is that the very first year itself, after the public transport being made electric buses are all air conditioned. It is vibrationless, it is noiseless, it is emissionless. It is completely changed the dynamics of the city. It's not only people who are going in electric buses are comfortable, those who are on the street, they are also, because no emission, no noise. And those who are sitting in the electric bus and going to their workplaces, they arrive at their destination fatigueless. As I said, no vibration, no noise, and they reach fatigueless. So a city having public transportation, fatigueless public transportation, will improve the productivity drastically. And Shenzhen city statistics says that in 2017, in one calendar year, 38,000 private cars they have taken out of the road. People are started using public buses. So same way, sir, under your leadership, we look forward to make Bangalore India's first city with 100% public transportation. We are sure that your dynamic leadership will be able to achieve that. So, having said that, let me extend a very warm welcome to Honourable Minister Sunill Kumar ji. Hardly 1 month after taking over, the ministership for energy, you have identified electric mobility as a priority item for Karnataka. A very big round of applause for Minister Sir for that. I also wish to extend a very warm welcome to Shri Kumar Naik, Additional Chief Secretary Energy. In the last couple of years, he served in all the departments of energy departments, in BESCOM, in KPTCL, in KPCL, all important power divisions he has managed, and everybody is familiar with him. And under his dynamic leadership, we expect much more transformation in the electricity sector to happen, smart grid, electric mobility, all this to happen in Karnataka. And we will be happy to work along with the energy department. Warm welcome to you, sir. We have 2-3 speakers in this inaugural session joining on WebEx platform. They will be virtually joining. One is our Bureau of Energy Efficiency Director General, C. Abhay Bakre. So Bureau of Energy Efficiency is a department under Ministry of Power, and we've done pioneering work, reducing millions of tons of carbon emission in the last 1 decade, leading to the LED program alone, leading to about 38,000 crore rupees per annum. So extend a very warm welcome to you, Bakre sir. I hope you are listening to me. And another initiative of Government of India is, particularly on the electric mobility, is a new company called Convergent Energy Services Limited, which is a joint venture of Energy Efficiency Services Limited and also the National Investment Fund under Ministry of Finance. So the managing director of Convergent Energy Services Limited, Mawa Acharya ji, extend you a very warm welcome to you for this inaugural ceremony. So Madam Manchula and Mr. Anbu Kumar could not join us. They were expected to join today physically, but they could not due to other pressing engagements. I extend a very warm welcome to Mr. Chetan Maini, who need no introduction. We all consider him as the father of electric mobility in India. He started with REWA some 20 years ago, when many of the technologies were not existing. And later he been successful in exiting that business when it matured. Today it is called Mahendra Electric, which is the REWA which he started along with his family some 20 years ago. Maybe he will talk more about it. So, and a very warm welcome to you, sir, and thank you for sparing your time and attending this workshop today. I extend a very warm welcome to our co-host, my co-host, Mr. P. Rajendra Cholan, Managing Director of BESCOM. He, in the previous tenure also, we worked very closely with him. We prepared a smart grid roadmap for BESCOM. We hope many of thereafter so many changes which happened both in government as well as in BESCOM top leadership. So we hope that now with stability, with both the dynamic minister and the dynamic ACS, many of the things which you proposed in the BESCOM smart grid roadmap will be implemented on fast track. We will stand committed to assist BESCOM in this transformation. And lastly, not the least, last minute inclusion. Mr. Bharat Kumar, he is from Karnataka, and he is a recognized leader and expert in the automation power sector, in the entire power sector. He been the managing director, global business development for OSI Inc., one of the most leading automation company, which have been acquired by Emerson last year. So he has spent some time with Emerson after acquisition. Thereafter, he has taken sabbatical, and he is wanting to do things for India, and he is now currently on a visit to India for a month. So it's a great friend, and been together on several platforms. So very warm welcome to Bharat, and thank you very much for agreeing to speak at this session. So thank you, and thank you for patient hearing, and we hope the workshop will be successful and room will be as full till evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reji Kumar Pillai, for giving us an insight into what exactly is in store for all Indians, and in future, what will the vehicle sector of India will look like, and also for extending a very cordial welcome address. ಬಂಧುಗಳೇ, ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಸಹ ಶ್ರೀ ಪಿಳ್ಳೈ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳನ್ನು ಅರ್ಪಿಸೋಣ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸರ್. ಹಾಗೆಯೇ ಈ ದಿನದ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಂ ಆಯೋಜಿಸುತ್ತಿದೆ. ಮಾನ್ಯ ಮಂತ್ರಿಗಳ ಮಾರ್ಗದರ್ಶನದಲ್ಲಿ ಶ್ರೀ ರಾಜೇಂದ್ರ ಚೋಳನ್, ಮ್ಯಾನೇಜಿಂಗ್ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟರ್ ಹಾಗೂ ಸಮಸ್ತ ತಂಡ ಈ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯರೂಪಕ್ಕೆ ತಂದಿದೆ. ಐ ವುಡ್ ನೌ ರಿಕ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ ಮಿಸ್ಟರ್ ರಾಜೇಂದ್ರ ಚೋಳನ್ ಫಾರ್ ಹಿಸ್ ಅಡ್ರೆಸ್.
Thank you. Honourable Minister for Energy, Kannada and Culture, Government of Karnataka, Shri V Sunill Kumar sir. Honourable Additional Chief Secretary to Energy Department, Government of Karnataka, Shri G Kumar Naik sir. Honourable Director General of Bureau Energy Efficiency, Government of India, Shri Abhay. President of ISGF, Shri Reju Pillai. Co-founder of Sun Mobility, Shri Chetan Mari. MD of Convergence Energy Limited, Shri Moho Acharya. Mr. Bharat Kumar, ex-MD OSA. All directors of BESCOMs and other companies, all MDs of companies under Energy Department, all officers, delegates of the workshop, and other stakeholders, press and media, a warm welcome to all. As you are all aware that BESCOM is the largest distribution company in the state, distributing electricity to more than 1.2 crore consumers, spread across 8 districts, including state capital Bangalore, which houses a large number of IT/BT industries. I proudly say that Karnataka is number one setting up infrastructure for solar, wind, and other renewable energy sources to an extent of 15,000 megawatt installed capacity across the state. This has happened consumers in large manner to provide uninterrupted power supply to the consumer. According to the survey, there are more than 18,000 electric vehicles operating in Bangalore and 30,000 in entire state, including 2 and 4-wheelers vehicles. In view of the fast depleting fuel resources and advancement in technology, there is need to promote large-scale usage of electric vehicles in the country. This requires setting up electric vehicle charging stations to meet the demand of electric vehicles. Considering this, Government of Karnataka has announced setting up 1,000 charging stations on PPP basis in its budget 2021. BESCOM, being a nodal agency for setting up and charging infrastructure for electric vehicles in the state of Karnataka, has organized these workshops on behalf of all the ESCOMs and other energy department. On these occasions, I am glad to inform that Karnataka is the first state in the country to implement electric vehicles and energy storage policy in 2017. To promote the use of electric vehicles by citizen, BESCOMs has dedicated electric vehicle sales, electricity tariff for EV charging stations, and also set up electric vehicle charging at 74 locations with 136 charging points across the BESCOM, and is working set up more than 1,000 charging stations across the state along with the highways. These charging stations can be viewed through mobile apps, and charging unit fees can be paid online. Further, Government of Karnataka is amending the building bylaws, wherein it will be mandatory for shopping malls, apartment complex, and high-rise buildings to provide dedicated electric vehicle charging points in their parking lots, enabling accessibility of charging points for electric vehicles. I also inform that BESCOM, in association with the CSTEP, has taken up innovative pilot project in solar rooftop integrations of electric vehicle charging stations with the energy storage system. I proudly say that this is one of the first kind of things in country. In line with co-electric campaign launched by Government of India, BESCOMs with the stakeholders, Government of Karnataka is taking up measures to implement EV charging infrastructures across the state. In this forum, I request stakeholders from the state government and technology providers to extend their complete cooperations achieving our objectives. Under the vision of our Honourable Minister, sir, to provide innovative, clean and energy efficient solution for better tomorrow, we are committed to facilitate all the EV manufacturers, investors and other stakeholders to help the citizens of Karnataka to turn Bangalore and entire Karnataka as the green energy hub of country. It has been honor to have the initiative and execute the first largest network of public EV charging station in the state of Karnataka. BESCOMs, I request all the participants to actively involve these workshops and other valuable suggestions, opinion and guidance in promoting policies and regulation of EV mobility. With this, I thank everyone present here this opportunity to address these valuable points regarding e-mobility in Karnataka. Thank you. Jai Hind, Jai Karnataka.
ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಂ ನಿರಂತರವಾಗಿ ಈ ಪರಿಸರ ಸ್ನೇಹಿ ಇಂಧನವನ್ನ ಒದಗಿಸುವಂತಹ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಗೂ ಎಲ್ಲ ಗ್ರಾಹಕರಿಗೂ ಕೈಗೆಟುಕುವಂತಹ ಬೆಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಎನರ್ಜಿಯನ್ನು ನೀಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದು ನಮ್ಮ ಆಶಯವಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಮಾನ್ಯ ರಾಜೇಂದ್ರ ಚೋಳನ್ ತಿಳಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ವಿ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ವಿತ್ ಅಸ್ ದಿ ಕೋ ಫೌಂಡರ್ ಆಫ್ ಸನ್ ಮೊಬಿಲಿಟಿ, ಶ್ರೀ ಚೇತನ್ ಮೈನಿ. ಅವರು 1999ರಲ್ಲೇ ಆಗ್ಲೇ ರೇವಾ ಅನ್ನುವಂತಹ ಕಂಪನಿಯನ್ನ ಹುಟ್ಟು ಹಾಕಿ ಆ ಕಂಪನಿಯ ಮುಖೇನ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಇಂದಿನ ಜನಾಂಗ ಏನ್ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು ಅದು ಸುಮಾರು 2 ದಶಕಗಳ ಹಿಂದೆನೆ ಅವರು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಸೊ ಇಸ್ ವಿ ಅ ಗ್ರೇಟ್ ವಿಷನರಿ. ಹಿ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಡೆಡಿಕೇಟೆಡ್ ಹಿಸ್ ಲೈಫ್ towards the electric mobility. So please put your hands together for Chetan Maini for his address.
Yellarigu namaskara. Honourable Minister, Mr. Sunill Kumar, Mr. Reggie Pillay, Mr. Rajendra Cholan, Mr. Nayak. It's so good to see that all of us has come together for such an important stakeholder meeting, and I really want to congratulate the government to put this together. So a big round of applause for the government for putting this. I think it's so important in terms of how we think of where we are going to go. You know, I've been driving electrics for more than 20 years. And I always believe that being born and brought up in Bangalore, cycled to school, that I enjoyed those days of clean, green Bangalore. And I'm sure we'll see a day when we come to a stoplight, when everything around us will be nice and quiet and clean. And I'm seeing those steps already. This last weekend on Sunday, you know, 2 deliveries were done on electric 3-wheelers from the delivery companies for my groceries and from others. No loud engine noises, no dogs barking, everything done seamlessly. So we're getting there. And I think that the growth in this is going to make us feel different, change the world. And Bangalore's always taken the lead in this area. Now, this is something happening at the world at a very huge level, right? And in India, if you think by 2035, 400 million of us will be an urbanized population. So we're going to have a huge demand on both energy and the environment. And how can we do things that could help us win in both areas on this front? And that's what's driving policy. That's what's driving all of us to go more and more electric on this front. But it's also a huge opportunity for the country. It's $200 billion opportunity and $100 billion opportunity in energy, because the entire energy ecosystem will be also disrupted, right? It also means the integration of renewable energy into electrics will become much more important. You know, just 0.5% of Karnataka covered with solar panels will power the entire state for all vehicles to be electric in the future. It's a small thing to do, right? And can you imagine that means the entire state runs on sun and is perfectly clean at a low cost of energy and makes sense. So this is not a figment of an imagination. I think with everyone coming together, we can integrate energy, mobility, and storage. And the work that's being done by ISGF and others are really trying to put this together that can really help how we can take forward India as well as Karnataka. India is quite unique. You know, unlike the West, 85% of India goes in 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, and buses. So we have to cater to these forms of transportations in India and infrastructure that goes with this. Shared mobility is on the rise, both for goods delivery and for passenger delivery. Another area that India has to focus a lot so that we get less vehicles on the road, but they are more clean and they can support a larger infrastructure on this area here. But there has been tremendous change. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, but what I've seen in the last 6 months, I haven't seen in 20 years, right? And I think that's what's important, right? Policy level changes and what's happening within the actual market, right? At a policy level, we've got a new FAME policy that has increased subsidies. We've got a PLI scheme that's been introduced. Last week, a Shunya policy was introduced. How does India go zero, full electric and zero emissions on all its deliveries, right? Wonderful top-level policies happening. CSL, who we'll hear from here later with Mahua, is doing incredible work to create large quantums of electric vehicles coming on. But what does that mean at the vehicle level? Over the last few months, electric two-wheeler sales have gone up 300%. 4 months ago in India, 1% of all electric goods three-wheelers all goods three-wheelers were electric. Last month, that has gone to 10%. So in 4 months, we've gone from 1% to 10% growth rate on this area, right? That's the kind of growth rate. During COVID, worldwide, the industry dropped. The electric vehicle industry went up. So we are in a very, very good position to look at this. Now, Karnataka, right from day one, has taken the lead on this area. We're the first electric two-wheeler companies, the first electric car companies, everything came from Karnataka. In fact, I remember 20 years ago, you could actually get a separate electric connection in your house if you had an electric vehicle. That's how forward-thinking Karnataka has been on its policy front in terms of looking at this area here, right? And others have followed it. Every state has always followed Karnataka, right? As Reggie had mentioned, we're the first one to set up the EV policy. We are the home of technology hubs. We have 40 plus companies today in automotive and technology. We have 65 companies now that started up in only electric vehicle space. This is going to kind of fuel the city and the state in a big way on this front, right? And we have most of the prominent players in electric mobility in Karnataka on this front, both design and manufacturing and infrastructure. And that is very unique because normally you'll have one or the other, but not all of them together. We at the mining group are doing a small little bit. Electrification is a very important thing for us. It's something we want to give back to the city, to the state, and to the country on this area. And we've been doing it for over 30 years on this front. Our recent area of Sun Mobility looks at battery swapping, where it addresses the issue of range anxiety, long refueling time, and addresses high cost. So as Mr. Reggie had mentioned, the cost of batteries are 40%. If you remove the batteries, electric vehicles can cost the same amount. So today in Bangalore, you can go and pick up an electric three-wheeler that costs the same as an LPG three-wheeler. And you can look at the cost of energy that's cheaper. And consumers can actually go electric without paying a premium. And in 2 minutes, they can swap at it. We have stations at IOCL petrol bunks and other places, and you can do that. And the idea is to make it as easy and simple for people to adopt it. We also believe everything should be done locally, right? Today, I have 300 people who are doing a technology center. We do battery manufacturing in-house. But not only that, all the stations, all the accessory systems are all made 100% in Karnataka and in around Bangalore. And the idea is to build locally and support whatever we can on this front as we look at it, right? We have today over 65 stations and 7 million kilometers and over 5 lakh swaps that we have done across this area and look forward to seeing how we can take this further. Now, Karnataka, I said, has always been the leader, but we set the policy in 2017, but a lot of states have now done it. We've got to refurbish our policy because things have changed and things have been so dynamic on this area. So I would look at the government to say, what have other states done? What is the market dynamics? How do we refurbish this policy to make us again in the leadership position on this area, right? Look at the consumer side of it, look at other solutions on retrofits that we can add on this area to bring it together. Look at also implementing the policy in spirit and word on this front that will really help the state on this area. I think retrofitting as infrastructure is a very important point. And BESCOM has, must say, in the country taken the leadership in this area, right? With over 130 odd charging stations across, they've absolutely shown the pathway of what can be done. But a lot more work has to be done. It's a great starting point on this area. You know, infrastructure is so important. When cities were moving, when we were moving to LPG, you notice everyone wanted to see where are LPG stations available before they would want to switch. The same was in CNG in North India on this area. So infrastructure will address the person's issue of range anxiety. The infrastructure has to come a little bit ahead of vehicles to enable, especially for shared mobility. If you look at the auto driver on this thing, if you look at delivery, a person who's delivering his on his scooter or on his three-wheeler, he has to run continuously. He cannot afford to stop. So he needs to see, or she needs to see where they can look at and how infrastructure is available. So my request is, how do we create an integrated, strong infrastructure policy? How can we get electric connections fast-tracked in 7 days? How can we think of making the cost of electricity installation much cheaper and uniform across this area? How can we take the leadership in the country to create policies around this? How can we cross-utilize the spaces that BESCOM has already for other forms of charging and swapping infrastructure, right? How can we add additional ones? How can we get, the metro rail and other areas so we can put all of this together to really create the right infrastructure solution for Bangalore at scale and Karnataka on this area. As some of you are aware, the Shunya policy, a Shunya movement was launched a few days ago, which says, how do we go to zero emission deliveries across India, and that everyone would use similar logos to say that your food, your delivery of your mobile phone was, or anything, or groceries was done using zero emission transportation on this area. I think it's a great idea that the government has launched, that it is uniform for everyone. Everyone should come on this front. I think here is where Bangalore has all of these e-commerce and delivery companies. Can we take that lead? Can we be the first city in the country to say all our deliveries are done using electric on this area, right? And I think that would really make us stand ahead on this front and take this forward. Thank you so much, and wish everyone a big success in this important journey of making India, Bangalore, and Karnataka all electric. Thank you so much.
ವೆಲ್, ಶ್ರೀ ಮೈನಿ ಅವರು ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದೆಡೆಗಿನ ತಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರೇಮವನ್ನ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಪಡಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಒಟ್ಟಾಗಿ ಸೇರಿ ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕವನ್ನ ಈ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ ಮೊಬಿಲಿಟಿ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿಯೂ ಸಹ ಮುಂಚೂಣಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ತರೋಣ. ಲೆಟ್ಸ್ ಗಿವ್ ಎ ರೌಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಅಪ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಫಾರ್ ಹಿಸ್ ಅಡ್ರೆಸ್. ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು ಸರ್, ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ವೆರಿ ಮಚ್. ವೆಲ್, ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಜನ ವೆಬೆಕ್ಸ್ ಮುಖೇನ ಜಾಯ್ನ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಉದ್ಘಾಟನಾ ಸಮಾರಂಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಬ್ಬರು ನಮ್ಮನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಉದ್ದೇಶಿಸಿ ಮಾತನಾಡಲಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇಸ್ ಮಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಮಹೇಶ್ ಬಾಬು, ಹೂ ಇಸ್ ದಿ ಸಿಇಒ ಆಫ್ ಸ್ವಿಚ್ ಮೊಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ಅಂಡ್ ಸಿಒಒ ಆಫ್ ಸ್ವಿಚ್ ಮೊಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಗ್ಲೋಬಲ್. ಬಂಧುಗಳೇ ಗಮನಿಸಿ, in 2018, Mr. Mahesh Babu was awarded the India's Greatest CEO Award for 2017-18 from Asia 1. And I will now request Mr. Mahesh Babu to kindly address all of us. Mahesh Babu, if you are there, it's all yours.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Are you able to hear me? I hope you are able to hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Please go ahead.
Honourable Minister of Energy, Shri V Sunill Kumar ji, Mr. G Kumar Nayak, Additional Secretary Energy, Mr. Rajendra Cholan, MD BESCOM, Mr. Abhay Bakre, DGBE, my dear friend Reggie Pillai, who is President IGF, and my colleague Chetan Maini. My friends, all of us, it's a warm welcome to this forum. It's a very important forum because I have lived and worked on electric mobility for 6 years in Bangalore and Karnataka as being part of CEO of Mahindra Electric after Chetan Maini. So it was a very interesting state because if you look at it, after the electric mobility policy announcement by Government of India, the first state to release an EV policy in 2017 is in the state of Karnataka. I strongly believe Karnataka is a very, very progressive state in terms of industrial policy, in terms of adoption to electric mobility, and any new technology for that matter. The government, the society, and the industry work together very, very hand in hand towards it. Why it is important to have electric mobility, I need not see. My colleagues have already spoken about it. India is on a verge of an electric revolution. And Karnataka plays a very vital role because it is one of the fastest growing state. Bangalore is the IT capital for the world, and many other cities look at Bangalore as an role model for new technology adoption. I would say still 2 years back, Bangalore used to have the highest number of electric cars and mobility in the country. So that's the kind of efforts and time put by the government and also the consumers to adapt electric mobility in the state. We have talked about two-wheelers. We have talked about, Chetan has talked about adoption of three-wheelers. I'm very happy to say that I was leading the Mahindra Trio platform to launch the first India's lithium-ion three-wheeler, both in load and passenger. I'm very happy to see most of the adoption happened around Bangalore. Bangalore is still any new technology, and Karnataka is still a huge adoption on any new technology, including electric mobility. BESCOM, I would like to thank BESCOM for creating a charging infrastructure, not only for two-wheelers, three-wheelers, but also supporting other places, including societies and depots for electric mobility. The only one what I would say, which is not yet happened, is the adoption of buses. I thank the government of Karnataka for making individual corridors, separate corridors for bus in Bangalore. I was told recently the bus tender has been opened, and BMTC is trying to deploy 300 electric buses. Ashok Leyland and Switch Mobility is happy to support. We have participated in the tender, and we are happy to convert and support electric buses in Bangalore and also in Karnataka. We are already working with BMTC, and we are sure we need support of BESCOM to make that happen. I think it is very important that the public transport becomes electric. I think it is a very, very important area while we are talking about two-wheelers and three-wheelers, which have already gone very, what I would say, in the adoption curve to 2 to 3%, and we are talking about 10% now. So by and large, I would say that a new technology adoption in Karnataka is very welcome by the government of Karnataka. Consumers want clean energy. COVID has actually proved that how clean the environment will be when we were in shutdown, and how we can really have a very, what I would say, emission-free life in cities. This can be further emphasized by converting the public transport buses into electric, and with the new CESL tender and also the tender which BMTC has recently launched, I strongly believe Bangalore will become a role model in public transport in electric mobility. I thank the industry department for the early 2017 EV policy, but I would request them to revisit, like Chetan said. Every state has now come up learning what Karnataka has done first, and they have given new policies in industry. I would request Karnataka to revisit that and help in public transport adaptation faster than what it was envisaged. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Raji Pillai, for giving me opportunity, and wish Karnataka to become the EV capital of the country and also become an example around the globe on what we are doing. Thank you very much.
Events such as this. Before I start, I truly want to congratulate the Honourable Minister and the Minister of Energy, Karnataka government, and the Karnataka government itself for taking the great vision to make this EV adoption true and real. At the same time, all the BESCOM and HESCOMs for leading the effort. Myself, actually, I live in Dallas. I'm just here after a long gap. I'm just visiting here to so-called design my second innings, actually. I've just retired from my corporate as of last month after a successful stint as working as a managing director. So a couple of things. How I've become a venture capitalist, looking at across the sector, mainly power. That's a bit of strength. I'm also considering a few EV companies in India as well to invest. At the same time, I'm also, it's a time that I feel that I'm so blessed to have, at an age of 44, what I could not have asked, actually, coming from a place called Chitradurga, more importantly from a village called Chiksidavnalli, and seeing the world and traveling across the globe for the last 15 years. And I'm trying to see what I can give back to society. As a part of that, last week, I actually adopted our village called Chiksidavnalli to make it a modern village. So that's the context. Coming to this EV, I guess I'm again a proud user of Tesla for a few years. It's great to see this EV. We know for sure that society, every now and then we see a few major changes that comes across. Obviously, it starts with a skepticism like anything else and becomes eventually reality. And EV is at that stage of major change that is going to bring to all of us, actually. If I can just ask one question to every one of you, that how many of you drive an EV vehicle? Can you please raise your hands? Look at this. I think we have a great vision, but look at this elite club, elite groups, the adoption level. So there's a practical approach here. In my view, there are multiple aspects that we all can be part of this so-called this journey, starting from, of course, the visionaries and leaders that is leading the effort of bringing and making this, the EV, the vehicles, the manufacturing, the design, the thought process being local, because we know that India has a very unique situation, simply including the number of breakings that take place, whatnot. I'm sure Chetan can talk about all day. So one is the contribution from the industry people to make the technology ground up so that we can just copy paste here because somewhere else the ones that have worked are not going to work here. Second aspect follows being the so-called the responsible citizens. We have to look at the environmental aspect. And third aspect, obviously the major aspect comes also from the utilities and other ecosystem that makes it reality. Today, if you really look at what is stopping us from buying a vehicle, we can say all day long, all the environmental conscious, whatnot, but at the end of the day, any technology that gets adopted, if it makes economical sense to start with, right? So I think the technological evaluation is coming at that right stage. Now, if we look at it, especially from the perspective of the life cycle cost being not just what does it take to buy for the first time, we know that initial cost of this vehicle is high, but if you look at the overall life cycle cost, like what does it take to buy it, what does it take to use it, what does it take to maintain it, I think EV definitely stands out. So as I said, I think as Mr. Reggie and other data that they laid out, that the operational cost is very much lesser than any other diesel or other engines. Third aspect, obviously, is the ecosystem, which is where the topic of the discussion today, basically the enough infrastructure that needs to be available for people to go for it confidently. There are a lot of innovative approaches that are being discussed and thought about it, but obviously India needs some unique solutions that make sense, actually, right? So in this context, I'm very happy to see the Bangalore and the Karnataka government particularly taking the leadership role. But obviously leadership role comes with a lot of responsibility. And my humble request is also that these adoptions should not just be limited to Bangalore. You know, it should probably take into every village and everywhere. We should look at overall holistically rather than just looking at few urban cities, actually. And we need to think through holistically. And every one of us have a role to play here. And I'm sure with the great leadership we have, the government and also at the various corporate and also the various utility sectors, this is going to become a reality. I would like to see when we have maybe next couple of years, when you have the same conference, I'll see a lot more hands going up. And I really truly wish this event organizers success. And I'm sure this day everyone will participate and have a fruitful day, actually. And thank you very much.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಮಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಭರತ್ ಕುಮಾರ್. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಅವರು ಕರ್ನಾಟಕಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದು ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದವರಾಗಿ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿಯೇ ನನ್ನ ಮುಂದಿನ ಭವಿಷ್ಯವನ್ನ ಎಲ್ಲರ ಜೊತೆ ಸೇರಿ ಒಂದು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡೋಣ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ದಟ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ಕ್ರೆಡಿಬಲ್. because coming back to Karnataka, thank you, Shri Bharat, for your talk. ಬಂಧುಗಳೇ, ಈಗ ಅಡಿಷನಲ್ ಚೀಫ್ ಸೆಕ್ರೆಟರಿ ಗವರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಶ್ರೀ ಜಿ ಕುಮಾರ್ ನಾಯಕ್ ಅವರು ನಮ್ಮನ್ನು ಉದ್ದೇಶಿಸಿ ಮಾತನಾಡ್ತಾರೆ.
ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಇಂಧನ ಹಾಗೂ ಕನ್ನಡ ಮತ್ತು ಸಂಸ್ಕೃತಿ ಇಲಾಖೆಯ ಸಚಿವರು ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರದ ಉದ್ಘಾಟನೆಯನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿರುವಂತಹ ಸನ್ಮಾನ್ಯ ಶ್ರೀ ಸುನಿಲ್ ಕುಮಾರ್ ಅವರೇ, ISGF ಚೇರ್ಮನ್ರು ಮತ್ತು ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರವನ್ನು ನಡೆಸಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಹಕಾರ ನೀಡುತ್ತಿರುವಂತಹ ರೇಜಿಕುಮಾರ್ ಪಿಳ್ಳೆ ಅವರೇ, ಶ್ರೀಯುತ ರಾಜೇಂದ್ರ ಚೋಳನ್ ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಂನ MD ರವರೇ, ಶ್ರೀಯುತ ಚೇತನ್ ಮೈನಿ, ಈ ಮೊಬಿಲಿಟಿಯ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲೇ ಅಥವಾ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲೇ ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಪ್ರಮುಖವಾದಂಥ ಆದಿ ಪಾತ್ರವನ್ನು ವಹಿಸಿದಂಥವರು, ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ಶ್ರೀಯುತ ಭರತ್ ಕುಮಾರ್ ಅವರೇ, ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದವರು ಮತ್ತು ಬೇರೆ ಪಾಶ್ಚಾತ್ಯ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಹೆಸರನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿ ಈಗ ಪುನಃ ವಾಪಸ್ ಬಂದಿರುವಂಥವರು, ಹಾಗೂ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೆರೆದಿರುವಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲ ನನ್ನ ಸಹೋದ್ಯೋಗಿಗಳೇ, ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಇ ಮೊಬಿಲಿಟಿ ವರ್ಕ್ಶಾಪ್ ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರದಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ನನಗೆ ಬಹಳ ಸಂತೋಷ ಅನಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ನಿನ್ನೆ ಕೂಡ ಈ ರೀತಿ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರ ನಡೀತು ಸರ್. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಗ್ರಿಡ್ ಸೆಕ್ಯೂರಿಟಿ, ಸೈಬರ್ ಸೆಕ್ಯೂರಿಟಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ವಿಶೇಷವಾದಂಥ ಒಂದು ಚರ್ಚೆಗಳು ನಡೀತು ಸರ್. ಈ ರೀತಿಯ ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರಗಳನ್ನು ನಡೆಸೋ ಉದ್ದೇಶ ಏನು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ನಮಗೆ ಮುಂದೆ ಯಾವ ದಿವಸಗಳು ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ, ಯಾವ ತಂತ್ರಜ್ಞಾನ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ನಾವು ಜನಗಳು ಏನನ್ನು ಬಯಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಥವಾ ನಮಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಏನನ್ನು ಬಯಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ಮತ್ತೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಸನ್ನದ್ಧರಾಗಲಿಕ್ಕೆ, ವಿಚಾರ ವಿಮರ್ಶೆಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ, ಜ್ಞಾನವನ್ನು ಹಂಚಿಕೊಳ್ಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಈ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರಗಳು ನಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಸಹಕಾರ ನೀಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ. ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಮಾತಾಡಿದಂಥ ಭಾಷಣಕಾರರು ಒಂದು ಒಳ್ಳೆಯ ಸುದ್ದಿಯನ್ನ, ಒಳ್ಳೆಯ ಮಾತುಗಳನ್ನ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ, ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಬಗ್ಗೆನೆಲ್ಲ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಬಗ್ಗೆನೂ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಳ್ಳೇದು ಬಂತು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು ಕೂಡ ನೀವು ಬಹಳ ಮುಕ್ತವಾಗಿ ತೆರೆದ ಮನಸ್ಸಿನಿಂದ ಅದನ್ನ ಸ್ವಾಗತ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಿ ಮತ್ತು ಅದನ್ನ ಅಡಾಪ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀರಿ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಕೂಡ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಆನೋ ಭದ್ರ ಕೃತವೋ ಎಂತು ವಿಶ್ವತಃ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಒಳ್ಳೆಯ ಯೋಚನೆಗಳು, ಒಳ್ಳೆಯ ಆಲೋಚನೆಗಳು ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದನೂ ನನಗೆ ಬರಲಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಬರೀ ಆ ರೀತಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಸಾಲದು, ಅದು ವಿಚಾರವಾಗಿ ಉಳ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಯಾರಿಗೂ ಪ್ರಯೋಜನ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಬಂದಂಥ ವಿಚಾರವನ್ನು ನಾವು ಅರಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅದರಿಂದ ಏನು ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ಕೃತಿಗೆ ಇಳಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಒಳ್ಳೇದಾಗ್ತದೆ. ಅದು ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದಾನೋ ಬರೋದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಮುಂಚಿತವಾಗಿ ಮೈನಿಯವರು ನಮಗೆ 1984ರಿಂದಾನೇ ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದಾನೇ ಅವರು ಹೊರಡಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು ಒಳ್ಳೆಯ ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ. ನಾವು ಅವಾಗ್ಲಿಂದಾನು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ ಅವರು ಇವ್ರು ಯಾಕೆ ಇದು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಇನ್ನೂ ಯಾರು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಅಡಾಪ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತಿಲ್ವಲ್ಲ, ಇದು ಹೇಗೆ ಇವರು ಸುಧಾರಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಯಾವುದೋ ಅದು ಹಣಕಾಸಿನ ವಿಚಾರ ನೋಡಿ. ಆದಾಗ್ಯೂ ಕೂಡ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಆಶ್ಚರ್ಯದಿಂದ ನಾವು ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ. ಆದರೆ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ದಿವಸ ಅವರು 30-40 ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಹಿಂದೆ ಮಾಡಿದಂಥ ಆಲೋಚನೆ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ದಿವಸ ಎಷ್ಟು ತೀವ್ರತೆಯನ್ನ ಮತ್ತು ಗತಿಯನ್ನ ಪಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಅವರು ಎಷ್ಟು 40 ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಹಿಂದೆ ಅವರು ಎಷ್ಟು ವಿಷನರಿ ಇದ್ರು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ರೌಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಅಪ್ಲಾಸ್ ಟು ಚೇತನ್ ಮೈನಿ. ಅವ್ರ ಮಾತುಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಅವರು ತಂತ್ರಜ್ಞಾನ ಪರಿಣಿತರು ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅವರು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಮೋಟಿವೇಶನಲ್ ಸ್ಪೀಕರ್ ಕೂಡ ಅನಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ನನಗೆ. ಅದನ್ನ ಕೇಳಿದಂಥವ್ರು ನಮ್ಮೆಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಹುಮ್ಮಸ್ಸು ಬರೋದು, ಉತ್ಸಾಹ ಬರೋದು, ಮತ್ತು ಅವರು ತೋರಿದಂಥ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ, ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಇರುವಂಥ ಅಗಾಧವಾದಂಥ ಪ್ರೀತಿ ಪ್ರೇಮ ನೋಡಿ ನಿಜವಾಗಿಯೂ ಸಂತೋಷವಾಯಿತು. ಮಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಮೈನಿ ಅವರೇ, ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ನೀವು ಈ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರವನ್ನು ಉದ್ದೇಶಿಸಿ ಮಾತನಾಡಿದ್ರಿ. ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ನಾವು ಹಲವಾರು ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ಈ ರೀತಿಯ ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಹಮ್ಮಿಕೊಂಡಿರೋದಂಥ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ವಿಚಾರ ವಿನಿಮಯ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಸ್ಮಾರ್ಟ್ ಗ್ರಿಡ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಇದು ಯಾಕೆ ನಮಗೆ, ಇವ್ರು ಯಾಕೆ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಅನಿಸ್ತಾ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕಲ್ ಇಂಜಿನಿಯರ್ಸ್ ಕೂತಿದ್ದೇವೆ, ನಮ್ಮ ವ್ಯವಹಾರ ನಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತು. ಇವರು ಬೇರೆ ಹೇಳೋದೇನು, ನಮಗೆ ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಸಿಟಿ ಅವ್ರು ತಗೊಳ್ಳಿ, ಕೇಳಲಿ, ಹಾಗೆ ಮಾಡಲಿ, ಈ ರೀತಿಯ ಒಂದು ಮನೋಧೋರಣೆಯಿಂದ ನಾವು ಕೂತ್ಕೊಳ್ಬಹುದು ಸರ್. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಮೊನಾಪೊಲಿ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್ ಸರ್. ನಮ್ಮ ಕೈಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಸಿಟಿ ಕೊಟ್ಟರೆ ಉಂಟು, ಕೊಡದೆ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ಹಾಗಲ್ಲ ಅಂತವರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಸರ್. ದೇ ಆರ್ ಅಗ್ರಿಯಬಲ್ ದಟ್ ನೋ, ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಸೋ. Electricity is a commodity, it's a public commodity. We are only managers of that one. obviously, we have to be very careful and we should understand what the public demands, what the consumer demands, and how the technology is changing. ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಒಪ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅದನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ನಮ್ಮ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯನ್ನು ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ತಕ್ಕದಾಗಿ ಬದಲಾವಣೆ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿರುವಂಥದ್ದು ನಮ್ಮ ಆದ್ಯ ಕರ್ತವ್ಯ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಆ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋಂಥ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಇದು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ನಾನು ತಿಳ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ಯಾಕೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಗ್ರಿಡ್ಗಳು ಸ್ಮಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿರಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ನಮಗೆ ಬರಿತಾ ಇರೋಂಥ ಬೇಡಿಕೆಗಳು ಅಷ್ಟು ಅಗಾಧವಾಗಿದ್ದಾವೆ ಸಂಖ್ಯೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ, ಮತ್ತು ಅಷ್ಟು ವೆರೈಟಿ ಇದೆ ಅದರೊಳಗೆ. ಒಬ್ಬೊಬ್ರು ಒಂದೊಂದು ಥರ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ನನಗೆ ಇಷ್ಟು ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಇನ್ನೊಬ್ರು ಎಸ್ ಟಿ ಬೇಕು, ಎಲ್ ಟಿ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಾರೆ. ನನಗೆ ಒಂದು ಅಪಾರ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದವರೆಲ್ಲ ನಮ್ಮ ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಸೇರಿಸಿ ಒಂದೇ ಕಡೆ ನೀವು ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಸಿಟಿ ಕೊಡಿ ಅಂತ ಕೇಳ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರಲ್ಲಿ ಹಂಚ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕಲ್ಲ. ಹೀಗೆ ತರ ನಮ್ಮ ಗ್ರಿಡ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಇಷ್ಟು ಬೇಡಿಕೆ ಕನ್ಸ್ಯೂಮರ್ಸ್ ಆಯ್ತು. ಆದರೆ ಉತ್ಪನ್ನ ಮಾಡೋರ್ದು ನೋಡಿ, ನೀವು ಇದ್ದಂಥ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತೇ ಇದೆ, ಇಡೀ ಏಷ್ಯಾದಲ್ಲಿನೇ ಪ್ರಥಮವಾದಂಥ ವಿದ್ಯುತ್ ನಾವು ತಯಾರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಸರ್. 1900ರಲ್ಲಿ ಹೈಡ್ರೋ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಸಿಟಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ. ಆಗಿದ್ದಿದ್ದು ಬರೀ ಹೈಡ್ರೋ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಸಿಟಿ ಮಾತ್ರ. ಒಂದು ಲೆವೆಲ್ಗೆ ಹೋದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೈಡ್ರೋ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಸಿಟಿಯಿಂದ ಯಾವತ್ತೂ ನಮ್ಮ ಬೇಡಿಕೆಗಳು ಪೂರ್ಣ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತು. ಆವಾಗ ನಾವು ಬಳ್ಳಾರಿ ಮತ್ತು ರಾಯಚೂರು ಮತ್ತು ಬಳ್ಳಾರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಥರ್ಮಲ್ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಸಿಟಿನ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ವಿ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಕೆಲವರು ಸೋಲಾರ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದ ಹಾಗೇನೆ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಸೋಲಾರ್ ಎನರ್ಜಿನ ಎತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಮುಂದಕ್ಕೆ ಓಡ್ಬಿಡ್ತಿದೆ. ಇಡೀ ಇಂಡಿಯಾದಲ್ಲೇ ನಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರಪೋರ್ಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಎನರ್ಜಿ ಜನರೇಟೆಡ್, ದಿ ಕೆಪಾಸಿಟಿ ಇನ್ಸ್ಟಾಲ್ಡ್ ಅಂಡ್ ದಿ ಎನರ್ಜಿ ಕನ್ಸ್ಯೂಮ್ಡ್, ವಿ ಆರ್ ದಿ ಟಾಪ್ ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಎಂಟೈರ್ ಕಂಟ್ರಿ. ಫಾರ್ ದಟ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಬಿ ಜಸ್ಟ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರೌಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಅವರ್ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್. ಈ ರೀತಿ ಉತ್ಪಾದನೆಯಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ವೈವಿಧ್ಯತೆ, ಬೇಡಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ವೈವಿಧ್ಯತೆ. ಜಾಲ ಮಾತ್ರ ಹಳೇದಿತ್ತು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಆಗೋದೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಆದ್ರಿಂದ ನಮ್ಮ ಸ್ಮಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿರುವಂಥ ಗ್ರಿಡ್ ನಾವು ತಯಾರು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಮುಂದೆ ಬರೋ ದಿವಸಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ನೂ ಸವಾಲು ಕೂಡ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಈ ಮೊಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ ಮೊಬಿಲಿಟಿ, ಈ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನಮ್ಮ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ ಎತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ರು ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಾನಿಕ್ನವರು. ಈಗ ವಾಪಸ್ ಬಂದು ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ ಮೊಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಅಂತ ವಾಪಸ್ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಈ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಕಮ್ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ಟು ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಸಿಟಿ. ಸೊ ಇದು ಮುಂಬರುವ ದಿವಸಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ನೂ ಹೆಚ್ಚಿನ ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು ಅನಿಸುತ್ತೆ. ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಈಗ ತಾನೇ ಅದರದ್ದು ಆ ದಿಕ್ಕಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಯೋಚನೆ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭವಾಗಿದೆ. ನಮ್ಮ ಸಾಂಪ್ರದಾಯಿಕ ಇಂಧನ ಮೂಲಗಳು ಸಾಕು, ಅದು ಶಾಶ್ವತವಾಗಿರೋದಿಲ್ಲ, ಮತ್ತು ಅವುಗಳ ಬಳಕೆಯಿಂದ ಪರಿಸರ ಮಾಲಿನ್ಯ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗ್ತದೆ. ಇವೆಲ್ಲವನ್ನು, ಅದು ಜನಸಾಂದ್ರತೆ ಇರುವಂಥ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ, ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನಂಥ ಪ್ರದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಳ ಕಷ್ಟ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಅನ್ನೋ ನಾವು ಅರಿತುಕೊಂಡ್ಮೇಲೆ, ನಾವು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಪರಿಸರ ಮಾಲಿನ್ಯವನ್ನು ಕಡಿಮೆ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋದಾಗ ಈ ಒಂದು ರೀತಿಯ ನಾವು ಯೋಚನೆಗಳು ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ ನಮಗೆ. ವಿಂಡ್ ಎನರ್ಜಿ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಸೋಲಾರ್ ಎನರ್ಜಿ ಮಾಡೋದು ಅಂತೇಳಿ. ಆವಾಗ ಎನರ್ಜಿ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಬಳಕೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆನೂ ನಾವು ಗ್ರೀನ್ ಎನರ್ಜಿ ಕೊಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಈ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಪೋರ್ಟೇಷನ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಅಷ್ಟೇನೆ. ಇನ್ನು ಮುಂದೆ ಬರುವ ದಿವಸಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ. ಸನ್ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಚಿವರು ಇದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ತಮಗೆ ವಿವರಗಳನ್ನ ಹಂಚಿಕೊಳ್ಳೋರಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಅವರ ಯೋಚನೆಯನ್ನು ಹಂಚಿಕೊಳ್ಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಆದ್ರಿಂದ ನಾನು ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಮಾತಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟಪಡೋಲ್ಲ. ಹೈಡ್ರೋಜನ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಅವರ ವಿವರವಾದಂಥ ಚರ್ಚೆಯನ್ನು ಆಗಲೇ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹೈಡ್ರೋಜನ್ ಎನರ್ಜಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು, ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು, ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಮುಂಚೂಣಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇರಬಹುದು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಅವರು ತಮ್ಮ ಆಲೋಚನೆಯನ್ನ ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಅವರು ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಈ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಈ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರ ಒಂದು ದಿವಸ ಕೂಡ ಮುಂಚಿತವಾಗಿ ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ. ಇದು ಆಗಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು ನಿನ್ನೆ, ಇವತ್ತಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಬಹಳ ಸಂತೋಷ ಸರ್. ಇಟ್ ಶುಡ್ ಟ್ರಿಗರ್ ಎ ವೇವ್ ಆಫ್ ಅವೇರ್ನೆಸ್, ವೇವ್ ಆಫ್ acceptance, wave of innovation and a spirit to make this available for common man at the most convenient way and at the most reasonable price. ಆ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ಈ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರ ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ. ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಒಳ್ಳೇದಾಗ್ಲಿ. ನಿಮ್ಮ ವಿಚಾರ ವಿನಿಮಯ 2 ದಿವಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಿ, ಅದು ಸುಗಮವಾಗಿ ಆಗಲಿ. ಇದರ ಏನು ಫಲಿತಾಂಶ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಸನ್ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಚಿವರು ಮತ್ತು ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಸರ್ಕಾರದಲ್ಲಿ ಅದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಏನು ನೀವು ಹೇಳ್ತೀರಿ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಕೇಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಕಾತರರಾಗಿರ್ತೀವಿ. ಅದರ ಸಿನಾಪ್ಸಿಸ್ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಕೋರ್ತಾ ನಾನು ಮಾತು ಮುಗಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ.
We need to take it forward after the workshop is concluded. ಇದರ ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರ ಮುಕ್ತಾಯದ ನಂತರವೂ ಸಹ ಆ ಫಲಿತಾಂಶದ ಮುಖೇನ ಮುನ್ನಡೆಯೋಣ ಅನ್ನುವಂತಹ ಸಂದೇಶವನ್ನು ರವಾನಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಲೆಟ್ಸ್ ಗಿವ್ ಅ ರೌಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಅಪ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಶ್ರೀ ಕುಮಾರ್ ನಾಯಕ್ ಫಾರ್ ಹಿಸ್ ಅಡ್ರೆಸ್. ಇದೇ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ISGF ಸ್ಟಡಿ ರಿಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಹೊರತರಲಾಗಿದೆ. ಐ ವುಡ್ ರಿಕ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ ದಿ ಆನರಬಲ್ ಮಿನಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಟು ಕೈಂಡ್ಲಿ ರಿಲೀಸ್ ದಿಸ್ ರಿಪೋರ್ಟ್, ದಿ ಸ್ಟಡಿ ರಿಪೋರ್ಟ್, EV ಚಾರ್ಜಿಂಗ್ ಇನ್ಫ್ರಾಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಚರ್ ಪ್ಲಾನಿಂಗ್ ಅಂಡ್ ರೋಲ್ ಔಟ್ ಫಾರ್ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಸಿಟಿ, ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ. ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಎಂದಿನಂತೆ ಇಡೀ ದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ಮಾದರಿಯಾಗಿ ISGF ಮುಂದಿನ ದಿನಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಇದು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಸಿಟಿ ಸರಬರಾಜು ಆಗಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಇದು ನಮಗೆ ತಿಳಿಸ್ಕೊಡುತ್ತೆ. ಇದರ ಒಂದು ಬಿಡುಗಡೆಯನ್ನ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಚಿವರಾದ ಶ್ರೀ ಸುನಿಲ್ ಕುಮಾರ್ ಅವರು ನೆರವೇರಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಆದ್ರೂ ಸಹ ಎನರ್ಜಿ ಇಲ್ಲದ ಚಪ್ಪಾಳೆ ಎಲ್ಲಿ? ಎನರ್ಜಿ ಇರುವ ಚಪ್ಪಾಳೆ. ಎಸ್. This report would go a long way towards the supply of energy and electricity to the different thing. Let's give a round of applause for our friends from the print and electronic media also. They have come here in large numbers. ಇದೇ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು MOU ಅನ್ನ ಹೊರತರಲಾಗಿದೆ between EECL and BESCOM. I would request Mr. Srinath, the DGM of BESCOM, and Shri Mohan, the DGM of EECL, to sign the thing and exchange it in the presence of the Honourable Minister. It will be signed in about 30 seconds and they'll come up and exchange the documents in the presence of the Honourable Minister. ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಶ್ರೀ ಶ್ರೀನಾಥ್ ಹಾಗೂ ಮೋಹನ್ ಅವರ ವೇದಿಕೆಗೆ ಬನ್ನಿ. ಸಚಿವರ ಉಪಸ್ಥಿತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಒಂದು ಮೆಮೊರಾಂಡಮ್ ಆಫ್ ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡಿಂಗ್ ಅನ್ನ ವಿನಿಮಯ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. Please take your places on either side of the Honourable Minister. Mohan avare ನೀವು ಈ ಕಡೆ ಬನ್ನಿ. Yeah. Let the Minister be in the center. Yeah. So now if you've forgotten to clap, here's another opportunity for all of you. MOU between EESL and BESCOM in the presence of the Honourable Minister, Shri Sunill Kumar, that the memorandum of understanding will go strong and will yield people-friendly results. Thank you very much. ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ಹಾಗೇನೆ ಇದೀಗ ತಾನೇ ಹೊಸದಾಗಿ ಸಚಿವರಿಗೆ ಇದೀಗ ತಾನೇ ಅಧಿಕಾರ ವಹಿಸಿಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸಮಸ್ತ ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಂ ಹಾಗೂ ಆಯೋಜಕರ ತಂಡದ ಪರವಾಗಿ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಇದೀಗ ಗೌರವಾರ್ಪಣೆಯನ್ನ ಮಾಡಲಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ದಯಮಾಡಿ ಸಚಿವರು ಈ ಒಂದು ಗೌರವಾರ್ಪಣೆಯನ್ನ ಸ್ವೀಕರಿಸಬೇಕಾಗಿ ವಿನಂತಿ. ಬನ್ನಿ. Well, the young dynamic minister, Shri V Sunill Kumar, is being honored on behalf of the entire team. So ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause and say that we are with the Honourable Minister. ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ಬಂಧುಗಳೇ, ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಕಾತರದಿಂದ ಸನ್ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಚಿವರ ಮಾತುಗಳನ್ನು ಕೇಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ತುದಿಗಾಲಲ್ಲಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಬಿಫೋರ್ ದಿ ಆನರಬಲ್ ಮಿನಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಸ್ಪೀಕ್ಸ್, he is indeed a very special minister. The day he was born, it was decided that he will become a special man. ಅವರು ಒಬ್ಬ ವಿಶೇಷ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ ಆಗ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಅವರು ಹುಟ್ಟಿದ ದಿನಾಂಕವೇ ನಿರ್ಧಾರ ಆಗಿತ್ತು ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ. ಬಿಕಾಸ್ he was born on the 15th of August. ಆಗಸ್ಟ್ 15ರಂದು ಅವರು ಜನಿಸಿದ ದಿನ. So with a huge round of applause, it's my pleasure to request the Honourable Minister, Shri V Sunill Kumar, to address all of us. ಬಂಧುಗಳೇ, ಸ್ವಾಗತಿಸಿ ಶ್ರೀ ಸುನಿಲ್ ಕುಮಾರ್.
ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಸಮಾರಂಭದ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರದ ವೇದಿಕೆ ಮೇಲೆ ಉಪಸ್ಥಿತರಿರುವಂತಹ ಹಿರಿಯರಾದಂತಹ ರಿಜಿ ಕುಮಾರ್ ಅವರೇ, ನಮ್ಮ ಇಲಾಖೆಯ ಅಡಿಷನಲ್ ಚೀಫ್ ಸೆಕ್ರೆಟರಿ ಆದಂತಹ ಕುಮಾರ್ ನಾಯ್ಕ್ ಅವರೇ, ರಾಜೇಂದ್ರ ಚೋಳನ್ ಅವರೇ, ಚೇತನ್ ಅವರೇ, ಭರತ್ ಕುಮಾರ್ ಅವರೇ, ಸಮಾರಂಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿರುವಂತಹ ನನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಆತ್ಮೀಯ ಬಂಧುಗಳೇ, ಸಹೋದ್ಯೋಗಿಗಳೇ, ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ನೇತೃತ್ವದಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಮಿನ ಸಹಯೋಗದೊಂದಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ವಿಶಿಷ್ಟವಾದಂತಹ ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರ ಇವತ್ತು ನಡೀತಾ ಮುಂದಿನ ಭವಿಷ್ಯದ ಕುರಿತಂತೆ ಯೋಚನೆಯನ್ನ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ದೂರದೃಷ್ಟಿಯ ಕಲ್ಪನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಕಣ್ಮುಂದೆ ಇಟ್ಟುಕೊಂಡು ಯೋಜನೆಗಳನ್ನ ರೂಪಿಸಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವಂತ ಹಿನ್ನೆಲೆಯಿಂದ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಈ ವರ್ಕ್ ಶಾಪ್ ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ. ತುಂಬಾ ಸಂದರ್ಭಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಉಲ್ಲೇಖವನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ವಾಹನದ ದಟ್ಟಣೆಯ ಕಾರಣಕ್ಕೆ ಪರಿಸರದ ಮೇಲೆ ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಪ್ರಮಾಣದ ಏರುಪೇರುಗಳಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಜಾಗತಿಕ ತಾಪಮಾನ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಎನ್ನುವಂತ ಮಾತುಗಳು ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಿ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂತ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಅದಕ್ಕೊಂದು ಪರ್ಯಾಯವನ್ನ, ಪರಿಸರ ಸ್ನೇಹಿಯಾದಂತ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕಾದಂತ ಜವಾಬ್ದಾರಿಯೂ ಕೂಡ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ನಾಗರಿಕ ಸಮಾಜಕ್ಕೆ ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಪ್ರಮಾಣದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಹೆಗಲ ಮೇಲಿದೆ. ವಾಹನ ದಟ್ಟಣೆಯಿಂದ ಪರಿಸರದ ಮೇಲೆ ಹಾನಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತಾದಾಗ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಇತ್ತೀಚಿನ ದಿನಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಪ್ರಮಾಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಚರ್ಚೆಗಳು ನಡೀತಾ ಇರುವಂತದ್ದು ವಿದ್ಯುತ್ ಆಧಾರಿತವಾದಂತಹ ವಾಹನಗಳ ನಿರ್ಮಾಣ ಆಗಬೇಕು, ಜನ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಆಕರ್ಷಿತರಾಗಬೇಕು, ಅದನ್ನ ಒದಗಿಸಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವಂತ ಮಾತುಗಳು ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆಗಳಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಕೇಳಿ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ನಾನು ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದಾಗ ಬಹಳ ಆಶ್ಚರ್ಯ ಆಯಿತು ನನಗೆ. ಚೇತನ್ ಅವರು 90ರ ದಶಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಕುರಿತಂತೆ ಆಲೋಚನೆಯನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಉಲ್ಲೇಖ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. 90ರ ದಶಕದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಸೈಕಲ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಓಡಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಂತವ್ರು. ಅವತ್ತು ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ ವೆಹಿಕಲ್ನ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಆಲೋಚನೆಯನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತಾದ್ರೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ದೂರದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಾದಂತ ಕಲ್ಪನೆ ಅವತ್ತಿನ ಸಮಾಜದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲವರ ನಡುವೆ ಕೂಡ ಇತ್ತು ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದನ್ನ ನಾನು ಉಲ್ಲೇಖ ಮಾಡಲೇಬೇಕು. ಇವತ್ತು ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಪ್ರಮಾಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಸವಾಲಿದೆ, ಭವಿಷ್ಯ ಇದರಲ್ಲೇ ಇದೆ ಎನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕಾದಂತ ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹವನ್ನ ಸರ್ಕಾರವೂ ಕೂಡ ಎಲ್ಲ ಹಂತಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಡಬೇಕು. ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಉದ್ಯಮಗಳು ಕೂಡ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ತಜ್ಞರು ಕೂಡ ಈ ಕುರಿತಂತ ಆಲೋಚನೆಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿ ಸರ್ಕಾರಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕಾದಂತ ನಿರ್ದಿಷ್ಟ ಸಲಹೆಗಳನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಕೊಡಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ನಾವು ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ ವೆಹಿಕಲಿನ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ಬ್ಯಾಟರಿ ಸ್ಟೋರೇಜಿನ ಕುರಿತಂತೆ 2017ರಲ್ಲಿ ಪಾಲಿಸಿಯನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಅದಾದ ನಂತರ ಬಹಳ ವರ್ಷಗಳು ಕಳೆದಿದೆ. ಇವತ್ತಿನ ವೇಗಕ್ಕೆ ತಕ್ಕಂತೆ, ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಆಲೋಚನೆಗೆ ತಕ್ಕಂತೆ ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ಹೊಸ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳು ಬರಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವಂತ ಯೋಚನೆಗಳು ಕೂಡ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಕಡೆ ನಡುವೆ ಇದ್ದೇ ಇದೆ. ಖಂಡಿತ ಅದನ್ನು ಅಳವಡಿಸಿಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂತ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನವನ್ನ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಪರವಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ತೇವೆ ಎನ್ನುವಂತ ಮಾತನ್ನು ಈ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಉಲ್ಲೇಖ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ, ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಅಥವಾ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಈ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂತಹ ಹೊಸ ವಿಷಯಗಳಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಮೊದಲಿಗರು. ಕೆಲವು ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಹಿಂದೆ ITBTಯನ್ನ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಜಗತ್ತಿಗೆ ಪರಿಚಯಿಸಿದಂತ ಕೀರ್ತಿ ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರೂ ನಗರಕ್ಕಿದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿಗೆ. ಈ ಗವರ್ನೆನ್ಸಿನ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಉಳಿದೆಲ್ಲ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಿಗೆ ಯಾರು ಮಾದರಿ ಆಗಿದ್ದು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಸರ್ಕಾರವೇ ಅವತ್ತು ಮಾದರಿ ಆಗಿದ್ದು. ಇವತ್ತು ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ ವೆಹಿಕಲಿನ ಮುಖಾಂತರ, ರೀಚಾರ್ಜಿಂಗ್ ಸೆಂಟರ್ನ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಮೊದಲಾಗಬೇಕು, ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಮೊದಲಾಗಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವಂತ ಅಪೇಕ್ಷೆಗಳನ್ನು ಇಟ್ಟುಕೊಂಡು ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರ ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ. ಈಗಾಗಲೇ 136 ಸ್ಥಳಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ರೀಚಾರ್ಜ್ ಸೆಂಟರ್ಗಳನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿ ಈ ಕುರಿತಂತೆ ಹೆಜ್ಜೆಗಳನ್ನು ಇಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಕಳೆದ ಬಾರಿ ಬಜೆಟ್ನಲ್ಲಿ 1,000 ರೀಚಾರ್ಜಿಂಗ್ ಸೆಂಟರ್ಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಾದ್ಯಂತ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಅನ್ನೋ ಸಂಗತಿಯನ್ನ ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಘೋಷಣೆ ಮಾಡಿದೆ. ಬೆಸ್ಕಾಂ ಇದರ ನೋಡಲ್ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಯಾಗಿದ್ದುಕೊಂಡು, ನೋಡಲ್ ಏಜೆನ್ಸಿ ಆಗಿದ್ದುಕೊಂಡು ಈ ಕುರಿತಂತ ಯೋಚನೆಗಳನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ನಾನು ಈ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಬಳಿ ವಿನಂತಿಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡೋದಿಷ್ಟೇ, ಇವತ್ತು ಮತ್ತು ನಾಳೆ ನಡೆಯುವಂತ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಾಗಾರದಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಉಪಯುಕ್ತವಾದಂತಹ ಸಲಹೆಗಳು ಸರ್ಕಾರಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕು, ಇಲಾಖೆಗೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ಜನ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಪ್ರಮಾಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೊಸ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂತಹ ನಿರೀಕ್ಷೆಗಳನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ತಂತ್ರಜ್ಞಾನಗಳು ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಪ್ರಮಾಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಬದಲಾಗಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಜನ ಅಪೇಕ್ಷಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಜನರ ನಿರೀಕ್ಷೆಗೆ ತಕ್ಕಂತೆ ಸೌಲಭ್ಯಗಳನ್ನು ಒದಗಿಸಬೇಕಾಗಿರುವಂತದ್ದು ಸರ್ಕಾರದೂ ಕೂಡ ಕರ್ತವ್ಯ ಇದೆ. ತಜ್ಞರು ಕೂಡ ಈ ದಿಕ್ಕಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಆಲೋಚನೆಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಒಟ್ಟಾಗಿ ಇವತ್ತು ಸೇರ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾದಂತ ಅಗತ್ಯ ಇದೆ. ನಮ್ಮ 2 ವೀಲರ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, 3 ವೀಲರ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, 4 ವೀಲರ್ನ ವೆಹಿಕಲಿನ ದರದ ಕುರಿತಂತೆ, ರೇಟ್ನ ಕುರಿತಂತೆಯೂ ಕೂಡ ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ಚರ್ಚೆಗಳು ನಡೀತಾ ಅದು ಜನರ ಬಳಿಗೆ ಬಹಳ ಸುಲಭವಾಗಿ ರೀಚ್ ಆಗೋದ್ರ ಕಡೆಗೂ ಕೂಡ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಗಮನಿಸಬೇಕಾದಂತ ಅನಿವಾರ್ಯತೆ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಭಾವಿಸ್ತಾ, ಈ ಇಲಾಖೆಯ ಸಚಿವನಾಗಿ ಖಂಡಿತ ಈ ಇಲಾಖೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಹೊಸ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂತಹ ಬದಲಾವಣೆಯನ್ನ ಮತ್ತು ಈ ವಿಷಯದ ಕುರಿತಂತೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಪ್ರಧಾನಮಂತ್ರಿಗಳು ಕೂಡ ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಪ್ರಮಾಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಕುರಿತಂತೆ ಉಲ್ಲೇಖವನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ, ಕೇಂದ್ರ ಮತ್ತು ರಾಜ್ಯ ಸರ್ಕಾರಗಳು ಈ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂತಹ ವಾಹನದ ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹಕ್ಕೆ ಸಬ್ಸಿಡಿಯನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಆದ್ಯತೆಯ ಭಾಗವೂ ಕೂಡ ಈ ವಾಹನದ ಖರೀದಿಯ ಹಿನ್ನೆಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಮುಖ್ಯಮಂತ್ರಿಗಳು ಕೂಡ, ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸರ್ ಬಸವರಾಜ ಬೊಮ್ಮಾಯಿ ಅವರು ಕೂಡ ಈ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ವಿಶೇಷವಾದಂತಹ ಆಸಕ್ತಿಯನ್ನು ವಹಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಖಂಡಿತ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಇದನ್ನ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹಿಸುವಂತ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ನಾವು ಖಂಡಿತ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಕ್ರಿಯಾಶೀಲರಾಗಿ ಕೆಲಸವನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತೇವೆ. ಅನುಭವಿಗಳಿರುವಂತ ನೀವುಗಳು, ತಂತ್ರಜ್ಞಾನದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೊಸತನವನ್ನ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂತ ನೀವುಗಳು ಸರ್ಕಾರಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕಾದಂತ ಸಲಹೆಯನ್ನ, ಇಲಾಖೆಗೆ ಬೇಕಾದಂತ ಮಾರ್ಗದರ್ಶನವನ್ನು ನೀವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಅದನ್ನ ಮುಕ್ತ ಮನಸ್ಸಿನಿಂದ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಸ್ವೀಕಾರ ಮಾಡಿ ಎಷ್ಟರ ಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಯಾವ ಸಂಗತಿಗಳನ್ನು ಅನುಷ್ಠಾನಕ್ಕೆ ತರಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೋ ಅದನ್ನು ಖಂಡಿತ ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ ಎನ್ನುವಂತ ಮಾತನ್ನು ಹೇಳಿ, ಮೊದಲ ಬಾರಿ ಈ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನವನ್ನ ಇವತ್ತು ಇಲಾಖೆ ಮಾಡಿದೆ. ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಸಹಕಾರ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಇರಲಿ ಎನ್ನುವಂತ ವಿನಂತಿಯನ್ನು ಮತ್ತೆ ಮಾಡಿ ಬಂದಂತೆ ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಅಭಿನಂದನೆಗಳು. ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the Honourable Minister has called upon the entire fraternity to share the experience what you have gained over the period of time and share it with the Government of Karnataka, and under the leadership of the Honourable Chief Minister and the Honourable Minister, the Government of Karnataka is fully towards inculcating all the important reforms which is necessary. ಬಂಧುಗಳೇ, ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಸಹ ಶ್ರೀ ಸುನಿಲ್ ಕುಮಾರ್ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳನ್ನು ಅರ್ಪಿಸೋಣ. ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಅನುಭವ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಸಹ ಕೈ ಜೋಡಿಸಬೇಕಾಗಿ ಮಂತ್ರಿಗಳು ಕರೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸರ್. ಇನ್ನು ಅರೌಂಡ್ 5 to 8 minutes ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಚಿವರು ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೋರ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಜೊತೆ ಇಂಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಬಳಿಗೆ ಮೈಕ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಪ್ಲೀಸ್ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಗಿವ್ ಯುವರ್ ರಿಯಾಕ್ಷನ್ ಇನ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ 30 seconds and allow the minister to react. Yeah, I think you can raise your hand.
These interactions related to any regulatory issues or government policies or EV charging or vehicle manufacturers. So any issues related with that, Honorable ACS sir? Yes, just we note down that. Any suggestion also will note down that. So all the stakeholders also please introduce yourself and raise your views or queries. Thank you.
Michael ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ.
Hello. Madan from Volta Automotive India.
Mike ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಇರಿ. I think
convert electric existing auto rickshaw into electric. We are the first company to do that in India. Our request is today the electric charging stations, people want to put it, but there are a lot of issues in the installing the electric stations, like space, availability, and sanction of power in time. And what is happening, there are regulations like take a meter, give a deposit, and take a permission from a BESCOM or whatever the electricity board. What happens? The deposit amount is too high. People are reluctant to go with. We have come out with a charging station, which is a AI-based charging station, which can be used as a basic meter itself, avoiding one extra meter, and it can give you a facility to the BESCOM, whether it is which vehicle is charging, whether it is two-wheeler, three-wheeler, or four-wheeler, and can give you the exact online, on-time, real-time data to BESCOM, where it can understand how many vehicles are getting charged and how many vehicles are used in that particular area, so that you can increase the number of charging stations in those areas where it is used extensively. Also, once you give a charging station for individual places, there is a chance of misuse of this power because you are giving a special tariff. So we have a special meter, whatever we have done, it can give you a real data whether this is used for electric vehicles or it is used for something else. So that when the data is transferred to BESCOM, whatever the incentive giving for a special tariff, they can give that particular unit only. They can give the facility that will make easier for everybody. Thank you.
ತಮ್ಮ ಸಜೆಷನ್ ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ತೆಗೆದುಕೊಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಅದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಇಫ್ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಎನಿಥಿಂಗ್ ವಿಚ್ ಯು ವಾಂಟ್ ಟು ಗಿವ್ ಇಟ್ ಇನ್ ರೈಟಿಂಗ್, ಕೈಂಡ್ಲಿ ಗಿವ್ ಅಸ್. ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಎ ವಿ ವಿಲ್ ಟೇಕ್ ದಟ್. And your question, your suggestion has been we have to be far more flexible and we have to have very smart meters and things like that, which will enable the BESCOM to capture the data appropriately and assess the demand and thereby respond also the way they can provide these facilities. That is most well taken. Ultimately, sir, we will have to go down to the level of the customer or the client. Wherever he is, they should be able to charge whenever they want to stop. When they are at home or on the way or everywhere, sir, it should be available. The way petrol pumps are available today, electric charging station should be available. Electricity is far more in our lives. So it is possible to demand wherever we are. So that kind of flexibility should be there in the system. Adanna ನೀವು ಏನು ಸಜೆಷನ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೀರೋ ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಕೊಡಿ. This is the time when we are formulating all these things with the leadership of our Honourable Minister. We will try to give whatever that's best possible. We should keep in track with the technology and
Namaskara, Niranjan, Delta Electronics India Dinda. Very happy to understand all the visionaries' views for the future in terms of e-mobility. I have two requests to make here. One is that when we are trying to have these e-charging stations alongside the highway or wherever it is possible, it is better to use the renewable energy, because all we say that once we try to use it from the conventional energy, again, the e-mobility purpose might not be fully addressed. So that is something which we could also try to plan while we are planning the long, I would say, highway or wherever the space is available. And then, as you rightly mentioned, in BESCOM main office, there is already such a project which is already done. ಎರಡನೇ ವಿಚಾರ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು wherever we try to install these e-chargers, we don't provide a lot of I would say focus on the aesthetics. I'm not saying in the BESCOM. BESCOM has done a very good job, but outside, I don't see a lot of aesthetic or a kind of a neat installation is being done. So I think we also have to have certain guidelines to make these aesthetics looks nice, like a good petrol bunk or good fuel station, so that the city also will look nice at the end of the day. So these are the two things which I would propose the respective people to consider here. Thank you.
ಇದು ಪೂರ್ಣವಾಗಿ ಒಪ್ಪುವಂಥದ್ದು ಮೊದಲನೇ ಸೆಷನ್ ಕೂಡ. ಇದು ನಾನು ಮಾತಾಡುವಾಗಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಅದನ್ನೇ ಹೇಳಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಅಡಿಷನಲ್ ಎನರ್ಜಿ ಏನು ನಾವು ಈಗ ಬೇರೆ ಇಂಧನ ಮೂಲಗಳನ್ನ ಬಳಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ, ಅದನ್ನ ರಿಪ್ಲೇಸ್ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ವಿ ಶುಡ್ ಗೋ ಫಾರ್ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಸಿಟಿ ಇಸ್ ಫೈನ್, ಬಟ್ ದ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಸಿಟಿ ಇಟ್ ಸೆಲ್ಫ್ ಶುಡ್ ಬಿ ಸೋರ್ಸ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಎ ಗ್ರೀನ್ ಸೋರ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಅದನ್ನ ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಹಲವಾರು ಬಾರಿ ಆಂತರಿಕವಾಗಿ ಚರ್ಚೆ ಮಾಡೋ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಸರ್ ಈಗ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಆಗ್ಲೇನೆ ಸೋಲಾರ್ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ, ವಿಂಡ್ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ, ಈಗ ನಮಗೆ ತೆಗೆದುಕೊಳ್ಳಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯತೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ನನಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಇಫ್ ಯು ವಾಂಟ್ ಟು ಸ್ಟಾಪ್ ಥರ್ಮಲ್, ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಡೂ ಎನಿ ಅನ್ಕನ್ವೆನ್ಷನಲ್ ಎನರ್ಜಿನ, ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅರ್ಲಿಯರ್ ಟ್ರೆಡಿಷನಲ್ ಎನರ್ಜಿಸ್ನ ಸ್ಟಾಪ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಸಹ ನೀವು ಗ್ರೀನ್ ಎನರ್ಜಿಗೆ ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹ ಕೊಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವ ಒಂದು ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಧೋರಣೆಯನ್ನ ಸನ್ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಚಿವರು ನಮಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ. ಆ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ನಾವು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಹಳೆ ಒಪ್ಪಂದಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಪರಿಶೀಲನೆ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು ಅನ್ನೋದು ನೋಡ್ಕೊಂಡು, ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಟು ಲೆಟ್ ಗೋ ಆಫ್ ಕನ್ವೆನ್ಷನಲ್ ಸೋರ್ಸಸ್, ಕ್ಯಾಚ್ ಹೋಲ್ಡ್ ಆಫ್ ನ್ಯೂ ಅಡಿಷನಲ್ RE ಸೋರ್ಸಸ್, ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ. ಎರಡನೇದು ಎಸ್ಥೆಟಿಕ್ಸ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೀರಿ. ಎಸ್ಥೆಟಿಕ್ಸ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಅದು ಬಹಳ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಕಲ್ಪನೆ ಸರ್. ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ಇವರು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಬಹಳ ಪ್ರೀತಿಸ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತದೆ. ಖಂಡಿತವಾಗಿ ಆ ರೀತಿ ಒಂದು ನಾವು ಕೂಡ ಡಿಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಮಾಡೋಣ ಸರ್. ಅವರು ಕೂಡ ತಾವು ವಾಟ್ ಎವರ್ ಏನು ಕನ್ಸ್ಯೂಮರ್ ಸೈಡ್ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಾನಿಕ್ಸ್ ಏನಿದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ದಟ್ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಬಿಕಮ್ ಫಾರ್ ಮೋರ್ ಎಸ್ಥೆಟಿಕ್. ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ಸೀಯಿಂಗ್ ದ ಸ್ಕೂಟರ್ಸ್ ತಾವು ನೋಡಿದಿರಿ ಸರ್, ಕಾರ್ ನೋಡಿದಿರಿ, ಎಷ್ಟು ಸುಂದರವಾಗಿದೆ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಸ್ಟೇಷನ್ಗಳು ಕೂಡ ಆಗ್ಬೋದು ಸರ್.
Just added one point. BESCOM is going to establish 15 EV charging station in the highways. There we are using this solar rooftop only, not for that our conventional energy. Like that, we are going to facilitate the vendors also who are establishing EV charging stations. We are guiding them to go for solar rooftop. So that ministers or honorable ministers also advised to call the tender in this regard to identify the maximum number of vendors. Exactly. That's what I'm telling you. Yes. You are doing the same thing.
So my name is Nagaraj Rao. I'm the president of the Bangalore Apartment Federation. We have about 2 lakh households under the control of the Federation, and many of them are having the vehicles, but not the electric vehicles. Slowly, we are trying to move them onto the electric vehicles. We had some discussions. Mr. Srinath has been very cooperative with us. And now what we would be requesting is the facilities of the subsidy extended to the big manufacturers and others could be extended even to the apartments, so that, because for the present, it is only sufficing or supporting only a few people, but in due course of time, it is going to increase. The same facilities and the subsidies could be extended even to the small apartments, as well as the infrastructure that we intend doing it. We have done a good job as far as solar is concerned, sir. Thank you, sir.
ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಹಿಂದೆ ಮಾತಾಡುವಾಗ ರೇಜು ಪಿಲ್ಲೈ ಅವರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಬಿಲ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ರೆಗ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅಪಾರ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಇದನ್ನ ತರಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. ಆದರೆ ಈ ಬೇರೆ ಯಾವುದಕ್ಕಿಂತನೂ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಸಿಟಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಜೀವನದಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಸೊಕ್ಕಾಗಿದೆ. ಅದು ನಮ್ಮ ಮನೆಯೊಳಗೂ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಅಲ್ಲೇನೆ ಕೂಡ ಚಾರ್ಜಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬಹುದಲ್ಲ, ಅಪಾರ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ಚಾರ್ಜಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬಹುದಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಯೋಚನೆ ಬಂದೇ ಬರ್ತದೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕಾದಂಥ ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿ ಇಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಕಮ್ ಇನ್ ಅ ಡೇ ಇನ್ ದ ನಿಯರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಫ್ಯೂಚರ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ನನಗೆ ಅನಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕಾದಂಥ ವಾಟ್ ಎವರ್ ರೆಗ್ಯುಲೇಟರಿ ಫ್ರೇಮ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ಈಸ್ ರಿಕ್ವೈರ್ಡ್ ಆರ್ ಸ್ಮಾರ್ಟ್ ಮೀಟರ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ರಿಕ್ವೈರ್ಡ್, ಆಲ್ ದೋಸ್ ಥಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ವಿ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಓಪನ್ ಟು ಅಡಾಪ್ಟ್ looking at the appropriateness of the technologies.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm from Piaggio Vehicles. We are the leading manufacturing company in IC and EV both space. And Karnataka, we are working very hard with government and other bodies. But still there is a lot of gaps we are finding because our vehicles are for common people. Chetanji is our partner in swapping technology, and we have charging home charging facility also. So what we are finding right now, the customers are asking the charging station. Many times me and Srinathji have spoken about this subject, but still not concluded. So people are not getting that much confidence what required. Second, subsidy part, because of the cost of battery, the vehicle cost is going little up. If you look the traditional IC vehicle, the cost comparison is going higher than IC vehicle. So it is impacting to buy a new customer, a common man customer, common auto driver. So my request is that state need to understand this problem and some subsidy need to give locally. When the policy announced that time, 1 lakh was the subsidy announced, but after COVID, it was not there. My request is please look in this subject. And one more thing is that everyone is speaking about the electric vehicle, but encouragement is not there. If you go, the what kind of motivation required, that is not getting. So please, as a government, need to push the electric vehicle. All views are very good. Everything is good. But as a company, as a corporate company, as a government body, as a government, everyone need to come and participate in this and push the things, whatever the hurdles. I told you the 3 hurdles. So we need to address, it will be impact common person because my vehicle is giving employment to society. A common person is earning from my vehicle. So my request is please look in positively and support common person, and it will be increase empowerment, employment, everything it will be increased. Thank you.
ಸರ್, ಈಗ ಮಾತನಾಡಿದಂಥ ಪಿಯಾಜಿಯೋ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಯ ವತಿಯಿಂದ ಸರ್ ಅವ್ರು ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸಬ್ಸಿಡಿ ವೆಹಿಕಲ್ಗಳಿಗೆ ಕೊಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಸರ್. ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಗವರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಇಂಡಿಯಾದವರು ಸಬ್ಸಿಡಿ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಲ್ವೇ? ಸಬ್ಸಿಡಿ ಅವರು ನಮ್ಮ ವೆಹಿಕಲ್ ಖರೀದಿಗೆ ಸಬ್ಸಿಡಿ ಇದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ? There is subsidy for the purchase, yeah, in the manufacturer's subsidy. So 15,000 rupees or so, no? According to the battery. Okay. ಸೊ ಅದರಿಂದ ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಸಬ್ಸಿಡಿ ತಾವು ನೋಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಒಂದು ವೆಹಿಕಲ್ಗೆ ಇಷ್ಟು ಸಬ್ಸಿಡಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ವೆಹಿಕಲ್ ನಾವು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದೀವಿ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಅಂದಾಜಾಗಬಹುದು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಯಾವ ಸರ್ಕಾರಗಳು ತಮ್ಮ ಯಾವ ಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಅವರು ಸಾಧ್ಯವಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅವರು ಆ ರೀತಿ ಯೋಚನೆಗಳು ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ತಾವು ಈ ಯೋಚನೆಯನ್ನ ನಮ್ಮ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಚಿವರ ಮುಂದೆ ಇಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀರಿ. ಖಂಡಿತವಾಗಿ ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಅವರು ಆಲೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಹೇಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬಯಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ಆದ್ರೆ ತಮಗೆ ಒಂದು ಗೊತ್ತಿರಲಿ, ಸಬ್ಸಿಡಿ ತುಂಬಾನೇ ನಾವು ಸರ್ಕಾರದಿಂದ ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ. ಅದು ಹೇಳಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು ಅವರು ಸನ್ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಚಿವರು. ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ನಮ್ಮ ಸಬ್ಸಿಡಿ ಫಾರ್ ದಿ ಏನು ನಾವು ರೈತರಿಗೆ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಸಿಟಿ ಕೊಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಅಗ್ರಿಕಲ್ಚರ್ ಸೆಕ್ಟರ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. 12 ರಿಂದ 13 ಸಾವಿರ ಕೋಟಿ ರೂಪಾಯಿಗಳಷ್ಟು ಸಬ್ಸಿಡಿ ಪ್ರತಿ ವರ್ಷನೂ ಹೋಗ್ತದೆ. ಇದು ಅಗಾಧವಾಗಿರ್ತದೆ. ನಮಗೆ ಬಜೆಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಕೋಪ್ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಪರಿಶೀಲನೆ ಮಾಡಿ ಅವರು ಮುಂದಿನ ಕ್ರಮ ವಹಿಸ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I'm Karthik. I'm one of the co-founders of Xeon Charging. So we are a charge point operator. So we are establishing various public charging stations across.
ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಮಾಸ್ಕ್ ತೆಗೆದು ಕೆಳಗಿಳಿಸಿ ಅದನ್ನ ನೇರವಾಗಿ ಮಾತಾಡಿ. ಮಾಸ್ಕ್ ಹಾಕೋಬೇಡಿ, ಹಾಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಕಷ್ಟ ನಮಗೆ. ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮೈಕ್ ಹತ್ರ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ.
Right. Yeah. So we are in the process of establishing various public charging stations across the state. So we have been working with other states, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and the work that is taken up by the government of Karnataka and BESCOM is outstanding. having had the experience of working with several other DISCOMs, I would say the initiatives taken here is very visionary here. So, so some of the problems, or a couple of problems or the challenges that we are coming across is that in a lot of the locations that we are applying for power, it turns out that we'll have to pay for the creation of the infrastructure as well, putting up the transformers and all that. So the cost of establishing that transformers and various other systems that is required is much more than the cost of the charges themselves. So this is one of the, I think you know that bringing in private capital into public charging stations is a very quite expensive affair, and the asset utilization or the utilization of our charging stations is not very high at the moment. So when we are asked to pay for the creation of the infrastructure also, it makes the whole project unviable at the moment. And I would also like to know about any subsidies that the government is thinking about to encourage public charging stations for private entities like us. Thank you. Right.
So just to answer this question, sir, our honorable ministers also instructed to establish more than 1,000 charging stations, especially in Bangalore. We are going to install more than 500 charging stations. Plus, we are going to facilitate other private players also to establish charging station with the cooperation of ESL and other 2 agencies. And we already created separate EV charging station shell in BESCOM office to coordinate with various stakeholders. So they are assist to all the manufacturers charging stations and vehicle manufacturer also. We are ready to coordinate with them. And honorable ministers also announcing 100 days program to, the first agenda is to establish 1,000 charging stations in Karnataka and inclusive of 500 in Bangalore. So that we call separate meeting with all the EV charging station. We share that availability of land and places and plus other facilities, either if there is any need for additional transformers or UG cables, that all we are ready to facilitate with all the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thanks for all the feedbacks and questions. Before we conclude the inaugural session, I would request the Executive Director of ISGF, Mrs. Reena Suri, for words of thanks. Yeah.
Yallagiru Namaskara. A very good afternoon to all. So this brings us to the end of the inaugural ceremony of the Karnataka e-mobility workshop. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for all our dignitaries on the dais for their time and participation in today's workshop. On behalf of Bangalore Electricity Supply Company and India Smart Grid Forum, I, Reena Suri, Executive Director, India Smart Grid Forum, would like to extend a sincere vote of thanks to our chief guest, Honourable Minister for Energy, Government of Karnataka, Shri V Sunill Kumar ji, for his gracious presence and vision, thoughts and encouraging words, and for his time for participating in Karnataka e-mobility workshop today. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Would also like to extend vote of thanks to Shri V Kumar Nayak, Additional Chief Secretary, Energy, Government of India, for your participation in today's workshop and for leadership and guidance to distribution companies of Karnataka to have the right ecosystem in place for success of e-mobility in Karnataka. Please join me in thanking our industry partners, Mr. Chetan Maini, co-founder Sun Mobility, Shri Bharat ji, Mr. Mahesh Babu, who joined us on WebEx, for joining us today and sharing your insights of the technology interventions they are undertaking in making our green mobility dream a reality. Last but not the least, a big thank you to Shri Rajendra Preet Cholanji, MD BESCOM, for his visionary leadership and for organizing the very first of its kind workshop, the Karnataka e-mobility workshop, and bringing all the stakeholders and leaders together on this platform today. A very big thank you to all the participants who have joined us today in person and online through the WebEx platform. Matumme Yalagiru, Dhanyavadagalu. Namaskara. Thank you. I would request all the participants to please stay seated. We will be starting our technical session in the next 5 minutes. Thank you.
Girish sir, are you there?
I'm here. Who is this?
Sir, this is Parul from ISGF.
Hey, Parul, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you really well. And would you like to test your presentation once?
Okay, you want me to share the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sharing the screen. Let me know if you see it.
Sir, I can see your screen.
You can see it, right? Okay. Do you want me to leave it like this or
Yes,
you want
sir,
me
I can see.
to stop sharing?
So you can stop sharing for now, and
Okay,
once the session starts, then you can share again.
sounds good. Thanks, Parul.
Thank you, sir. Hello, Girish sir.
Yes, Parul.
Sir, can you share
We will
your
start with
PPT
the
one more
technical
time?
session 1 right now. Please invite everybody to come inside the auditorium. You have a bell, Sneha? You have a bell or something?
Okay, so Parul, I'll share my screen then.
Yeah, we can see you and hear you, but just give us 1 minute.
Sure.
We'll start the session. Just tell people outside to come inside. He's speaking. Girish, please go ahead, speak.
Okay, Reggie, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I'll share my screen then.
Why this is coming, Volta? Yeah, we can see you also.
Okay, great. Let me share the screen.
Thank you for staying on. It's well past midnight in San Francisco. Thank you for your participation, support. Maybe in another 2 minutes you can start.
Sounds good. No, it's my pleasure, Reggie. Thank you for having me here. I'll be on standby.
You have Girish bioslide? You do.
पूरे टॉपिक्स पे हैं। Request everyone to please settle down. We're starting with our first technical session on electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. I request everyone to please settle down. Request all participants standing outside to please come inside and join for the technical session. So should we start? Should we start? Welcome back to the first technical session for today's workshop on this electric vehicle and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We will be covering the session topics listed on the screen: emerging electric mobility scenario, global and India, electric vehicle fundamentals, battery, motor, BMS, other components, EV charging fundamentals, EV charging infrastructure, types, communication protocols, Indian standards for electric vehicle charging infrastructure, electric vehicle charging impacts on electricity distribution grid, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, planning studies in Bangalore. And lastly, software platforms for scheduling electric vehicle charging and payment settlement. So please put your hands together for the speakers for this session. Shri Rish Ghatikar, the Lead Information and Communication Technologies Program, Electric Power Research Institute. Thank you so much, Rish, for joining us today and staying up late in the night. And Mr. Rish Kartikar leads the Information and Communication Technologies program at the Electric Power Research Institute in United States. Mr. Gartikar's research identifies, creates, and transfers digital energy solutions for the electric industry, emphasizing the remote management of distributed energy resource technologies and services. So thank you, and please welcome Mr. Rish Kartikar, and over to you, Rish, for starting the session.
Wonderful, Reena. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Reena. Thank you for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be part of this workshop, and thank you for India Smart Grid Forum for having me here. Sorry, I cannot be there in person as much as I would have loved to be there in person, considering the circumstances. This is the best we could do. I'd like to also thank the Honourable Minister, if he's still around, Mr. V Sunill Kumar, Additional Secretary, Mr. G. Kumar Nayak, and Rajendra Cholan, whom I have had many acquaintances in the past, the Managing Director of BESCOM. It's good to be here. So today I will talk a little bit about some of the experiences we are seeing in the United States, and also, other parts of the, the world in adoption of electric vehicles. And I have tried to emphasize this a little bit in terms of a connected ecosystem. It's very important to kind of look at electric vehicles as not a standalone system, but an integrated grid system. So that's what I'm going to be emphasizing on. As Reena mentioned, I am now working for Electric Power Research Institute, which is a nonprofit institute based here in Northern California, Palo Alto, the headquarters of Tesla, for those who know Tesla electric cars. And for almost 15 years, I was working as a lead for the grid integration research at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, which is the US Department of Energy National Lab. So, the focus I have now is on distributed energy resources, particularly things like energy storage systems and electric vehicles. I would like to start by emphasizing a very important point. Okay, so a lot of people spoke today about the cost of electric vehicles, the experience of electric vehicles, whether it's about noise or other things. But one of the fundamental and very important factor that is critical from my perspective, and why electric vehicles is key, is the carbon dioxide emissions. Okay, you can call them as greenhouse gas emissions as well. What happened in the United States in 2015 is unprecedented. It hadn't happened for almost 30 plus years. What happened in 2015 is, of all the sectors, transportation sector became the highest carbon emitting sector in the United States. Okay, previously the highest emission sector was the electric generation, because a lot of generation was fossil based generation. For that reason, it was very high. But as the state renewable generation started picking up, the transportation started to continue the trend. So it became highest carbon emission. So to really address the whole carbon problem, you cannot look at electricity, clean electricity, whether it's solar or wind or even nuclear to some extent, or improving efficiency in commercial industrial buildings or residential buildings. You have to look at that holistically, and transportation sector becomes a very critical part, and electrification is an important aspect in reducing emissions from the transportation sector. Okay, in the United States, unfortunately, not much happened in last 4.5, 5 years, but things are changing very fast in last 1 year. We have just recently in September, the president has issued an executive order to have 40 to 50% of US electric vehicle share of sales by 2030. It's a very ambitious goal, and a lot of funding commitment has been made to advance electric transportation in the country. In the state where I am from, California, there are a lot of parallels with what Karnataka is. California was the first state for mandating the energy storage, as well as has one of the most aggressive electric vehicle policies in the country, just like Karnataka has. And I'm originally from Karnataka. I was born and raised in Karnataka, not Karnataka Hubli. My brother still lives in Bangalore, so Karnataka is very close to me. So when Reggie asked me to be part of this workshop, it was an honor. It was something that I could give back to my state of some of the things that Karnataka has embarked upon, and I'm very, very honored to be here with you. So the EV adoption trend, started sometime back, maybe 75, 80 years ago, again, 25, 30 years ago, but this time the trend is irreversible in my perspective. As you can see on the left chart that you can see here, in the electric vehicles have expanded significantly. The majority of the electric vehicle adoption is in China, okay, as you can see in the blue bar down there, followed by Europe and United States. Okay, so a lot of emerging countries, including India, not just Karnataka, have a lot of role to play in advancing electric vehicles adoption in the country. So if you look at the chart on the right side, India is unique, and somebody mentioned that earlier. And the uniqueness comes from the fact that 85% of India doesn't drive four-wheelers. Two-wheelers are a very critical component of the commute in India. So you can see that both three-wheelers and two-wheelers have significantly advanced in recent years in terms of adoptions of electric vehicle. And the buses are also a very critical aspect. Now I'll talk about the buses in terms of the public transportation a bit, but the passenger vehicles and commercial vehicles still need to grow significantly in order to address transition into the electric mobility and the decarbonization of the transportation sector. So one of the studies that we look, and I have worked on this, and this is a project we are doing for the US Department of Energy, is not looking at the electric vehicles or the charging infrastructure as an independent system. We look at that as an integrated system. So of all the three things, or many things, the three very important components that we look into the stakeholders is, of course, the electric vehicle community. The original equipment manufacturers we call for automotives in US and Europe, they're like BMW, Mercedes or General Motors, Chryslers, etc. But in India, like Mahindras and Tatas, etc., are very, very critical in advancing electric mobility. When it comes to charging infrastructure, it's very important to have charging infrastructure that's adequate enough to have people encouraged to buy electric vehicles. A question always comes, which should come first, electric vehicle adoption or charger station adoption? In my perspective, charging stations should always be adequate enough to encourage EV to be, bought and used by the users. And I use the same analogy. I think Minister made an analogy a little bit earlier on a different context, but I would like to make that from the cellular context. India leapfrogged the entire cellular phone system. So a complete generation missed the fact that there was a landline that existed, especially the rural India, right? And that wouldn't have happened unless you have cellular infrastructure, the cell towers existing. People would not buy a phone if you did not have the infrastructure to support it. The same analogy applies to electric vehicles. Unless you have adequate number of charging infrastructure, it is very difficult. So in the United States, it's the same experience. So a lot of incentives and a lot of public programs and infrastructure is being built to support the adoption of electric vehicles. The third part of this network, which a lot of people miss, and BESCOM plays a very critical role in Karnataka and other energy services companies equally across the state, and that is grid and electric grid operations. Electricity becomes a very critical aspect, and not just electricity, but reliable supply of electricity and cost-effective, affordable supply of electricity becomes a very critical aspect in motivating the citizens to buy and use electric vehicles. And the chart on the right is a really complex chart, but the important concept there is to understand that each of these networks are, integrated and communicating, right? Just like the vehicles are getting smarter, where you can have onboard telematics to communicate with vehicles. The charging stations are becoming smarter because you can manage charging stations remotely, build the customers remotely using RFID card or QR code or some other means. And then the connectivity of these charging stations with the utility network and utility operating system, so they can be monitored and continue to provide reliable supply, is becoming very critical. So we're looking at that as a connected ecosystem, and the reference architecture on the right shows how connected the entire ecosystem is. And at the same time, I'm not going to talk about that today, but the cybersecurity aspect of how do you ensure that people can continue to charge and the grid can continue to stay reliable become a very important aspect to be considered. So let's talk about charging infrastructure. So I mentioned about the importance of the charging infrastructure, but one question always remains. It's not about having the charging infrastructure. It's about the type of charging infrastructure you have and where you have the charging infrastructure makes a lot of difference. And this is the study analysis that shows from the data on the left chart that a majority of the adoption in the United States is four-wheelers, by the way. It's not two-wheelers or three-wheelers. But because of the adoption of the four-wheelers, a lot of people charge their cars at homes. And that's why you see whether it's a slow charger, or fast charger, the adoption of chargers is significantly at both at the private level as well as the public level, but also the adoption follows the number of electric vehicles. So that's why you see, if you look at this, the adoption of charging stations by country, and this is the 2019 data, again, China has the highest number of charging stations, whether it's a fast charger or slow chargers or publicly accessible charging stations. And this is again from International Energy Administration data. But when you look at India, right, it's growing, right? But the number of chargers per car are significantly lower, okay? So to really encourage higher adoption of electric vehicles, whether it's two-wheelers or four-wheelers, there has to be an effort to increase the installation of charging infrastructure. And I was very elated and excited to hear BESCOM's initiatives, right? The minister mentioned about 1,000 charging infrastructure. Maybe you will need more. But again, it's not about 1,000 charging infrastructure, where those charging infrastructures are being installed and what is the power capacity of those charging stations and how often people can charge those charging stations makes a lot of difference. So a big analysis need to happen in terms of determining the best ideal location and optimize charging infrastructure for those 1,000 charging stations. And in all of this, we know really well that government plays a very critical role. In the United States, there are subsidies at the federal level for charging stations, and there are subsidies at the state level to encourage early installation of charging stations and early adoption of electric vehicles. So then the industry and the market can pick up and continue to use that infrastructure and the whole EV ecosystems can grow. Government shouldn't be doing everything, but at least should be kickstarting the process that allows the charging infrastructure to be there for EV adoption. So that's what a lot of countries in the United States is doing from that perspective. So when we talk about the charging stations, we talk about many different types of charging stations. So when I started working in the industry, almost like in the EV industry, like almost 6 years ago, there were three types of charging stations that were very prominent. One was what we call level 1 charging stations. This is just our 3-prong socket we have at home. So, that charges at close to 1.4 kilowatt, peak power. It's an AC charging that's available at home. The second one, what we call as level 2 charging stations. It's also an AC charging stations, but it's of higher capacity. So it can charge anywhere up to 25 kilowatts, around 6.6 to 25 kilowatt. What it does is it allows EVs to charge faster than the batteries to charge faster. The third one was DC charging stations called DC fast chargers or DCFCs. They are higher voltage, much higher voltage charging stations, and they can go up to 50 to almost close to 125 to 150 kilowatt capacity. So most of the Tesla charging stations, they call superchargers or DC fast network that are there in public charging spaces are very fast charging stations that allows vehicles to charge pretty quickly, but not anywhere close to the gasoline it takes or the petrol that you need to fill in at a petrol station. And that's where a lot of what we call now as extreme fast charging stations or XFCs, and some call them as ultra fast charging stations as well, are coming into existence. And those are high voltage, high current charging infrastructure. Those are typically at the low voltage or medium voltage setup, and they are 200 kilowatts and above. So literally, you can look at one charging station, 5 feet by 6 feet charging station, equivalent to 25,000 square foot building, peak power, right? So you can understand the magnitude of this. And what we are looking into is not just understanding the need of extreme fast charging for electric mobility, but also the impact that extreme fast charging stations can cause on electric grid supply, as well as potential impact if somebody, misuses those extreme fast charging stations. So there's just an understanding that, as I mentioned, there has to be a mix of these different types of charging stations and plan to allow, charging infrastructure to be adequate enough for the EV adoption. The second part of this is understanding very closely the characteristics of the load profile. Because remember, I mentioned that electric vehicle charging stations and electric vehicles are very closely integrated with the electric grid, electricity supply, after all, right? So that electricity supply, understanding what a number of charging events, we did a lot of analysis in understanding, who is charging, how many times they're charging, how much electricity is consumed, where the electricity is consumed. As you can see in this chart, the green on the pie chart on the left shows a majority is charged at the residential level, at level 2. Okay, and the next one comes very closely is the public charging stations. Okay, so that's why I think it's very important to look at this data and say where the incentives, where the motivation should be made. And somebody asked a question, how can we install charging stations at apartment? What we call as multi-unit dwellings are very critical at the end of the day. How do you serve those multi-unit dwellings, especially if you have a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler? How do you enable that charging? So without that, the adoption will be very, very difficult. So when you look at the load profiles at the aggregate level, we look at the data, weekday data, how the vehicles are charged at weekday. We look at the weekend data, how the vehicles charge at the residential level or the DC fast charging level. It really helps us understand the impact that the charging will cause to the grid. And second, and the most important answer it will give us is how do we manage this charging infrastructure in a way that doesn't cause any anomalies in the grid, because we only have limited capacity on the grid at some times, and those capacities can also be variable depending on the type of supply conditions you have. And so looking at these profiles will let you know exactly how you can manage that flexibility and charging infrastructure for the electric vehicles. And that goes back to linking to the renewables, right? So electric vehicles, although are very important, it serves one very critical is the tailpipe emissions, are significantly reduced because it's the source emissions that are reduced from going from internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles. But at the same time, you can continue, if you really want to go to the mission of decarbonization, looking at electricity generation sector becomes very critical. This is just a graph of the total generation capacity one state in the United States has, that's for California, okay? So it shows many different type of generation systems that are out there. And as you can see, the total generation capacity that California has is close to 60,000 or 61,000 megawatt, right? Close to 60 gigawatt to be precise. So, but the peak demand is also very critical, and how California is shaping up the renewables plays a critical role in understanding the impact and the growth of electric mobility. As you can see, that red curve is called the duck curve, famous California duck curve, because it kind of looks as a duck belly and the neck of a duck on the right side. What it does is gives you a net load. Okay, it tells you exactly the amount of net load that exists on the grid when, for example, in the afternoon, you have a significant rooftop solar generation happening locally. And that's why the grid demand falls quite a bit. So in the evening, when the sun is going down and the wind hasn't picked up, there's a significant ramp up of demand from the grid power. Okay, so you can see that there are over generation conditions during the belly. So you don't know what to do with excess generation when you are a grid operator. And there are under generation conditions at the tail as well as at the neck on the right side. So that tells you that how do you provide electricity at those times when there is excess demand, but you cannot have supply. So this is where electric vehicle plays a very critical role in providing resources where you can charge for electric cars when there is excess generation happening and not charge when there is under generation is happening. To enable that, states like California are adopting pilot rates and tariffs. And this is where BESCOM plays a very critical role. For me, when you think about electric vehicles, you cannot think about electric vehicles or charging infrastructure without a utility being a very critical role. And this is just giving some example of how utilities here in California are integrating charging infrastructure with electric grid infrastructure with different models. So those models we have seen are primarily three types of models. One is a customer-owned model. People install the charging stations, they own the charging stations like a home, right? For example, or a commercial building is a good example. Then the second is a third party, where a third party service is provided at public spaces or highway corridors. In India, for example, at petrol pumps can be converted into a charging station infrastructure that can be owned by a third party. And the third model, which is being looked here, is utility-owned charging infrastructure. Even India is looking into it as well. I know some utilities like Tata Power is in Delhi, for example, are considering that alternative, where utility, especially the public spaces and highway corridors, is important. There is another aspect which I think we all missed in today's, and I would like to emphasize, is the underserved communities. The underserved communities are basically the poverty communities, right? A lot of times when we have the subsidies and infrastructure, it has typically supported the, or rather not well served these communities. So US is looking at energy equity, as a key aspect on how do you make sure that even the underserved community plays a very critical role and they're not missed, especially when the ratepayers' money or the taxpayers' money is used to provide these subsidies. The other part of this is enabling flexibility, and the flexibility is enabled right now in what we call it as a dynamic rates for electricity. We spoke about 5 rupees a unit, 5 rupees a kilowatt hour, right? That's great. What if there is a lack of supply? Can you increase that to 10 rupees a unit so people can be motivated to charge at a different time if in case such a tariff is well known and advertised and people are aware of it? And we do that all the time. We go to shopping when there is a sale, so that is a very well-known system to encourage people to adopt flexibility. And so utilities are trying different rates, including time of use rates, what India called time of day rates, where you can look at time of use rates for charging station owner or EV driver, because they can be different, right? In the case of public charging, the owner of the charging station is not the same as the owner of the EV. So there are many different pilots we are doing out here that really understands how we can encourage flexibility while not limiting the charging requirements or the driving requirements of an electric vehicle owner. So in the United States, we do have a lot of utility that are looking into specific rates like India has for EVs, but also making them time of use rates to encourage flexibility so that you can charge the car when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, right? So that gives the holistic view, an integrated view of the decarbonization challenge. The other aspect of this is the cost, right? At the end of the day, cost plays a very critical role in most of the decisions that we make, right? I would have loved to see the environmental impacts emphasized significantly, the carbon emission impact emphasized significantly. But at the same time, if you have to really encourage this mass adoption of electric vehicles, cost plays a very critical role. And this is where we can see that right now, the battery electric vehicles, the chart on the right shows the battery electric vehicles pre-tax prices right now are a little bit expensive because depending on the type of vehicle, typically in a smaller vehicle, the cost of battery is much higher relative to the vehicle, but when you start going to a bigger vehicle, the cost of battery falls a little bit lesser than the cost of vehicle because the infrastructure that's needed to build the vehicle is much higher. So typically we look around 29-30% of cost of total vehicle in coming to the batteries, and this is through real data, right? But we expect, this is a Bloomberg New Energy Finance study, that by 2024, in a couple of years, the electric vehicle will reach what we call as singularity, EV singularity. It's basically a term that is used to define when the price of electric vehicles, right, are in parity with its existing technology that it's replacing, in this case, the internal combustion engine vehicles. So we expect by 2024 that'll be there. But even without that, the total cost of ownership becomes very, very critical in understanding, because it's not just the cost of battery coming down and the adoption of EVs going up, as you can see on the chart on the left, because this data very clearly shows as the cost of batteries are coming down, and Mr. Reggie mentioned almost from $3,000 to now coming down to $135, $137 per kilowatt hour, and expected to go to 100 to 95 in a couple of years. Right? There's a clear trend with the cost of batteries going down, the adoption of electric vehicles going up. But that's not the only one that one need to consider as a first cost. The total cost of ownership becomes increasingly important. And this is the study back in India. This is a study we did with India Smart Grid Forum, World Bank, and Shakti Foundation almost like 3 years ago, where we looked at the electrification of public transportation. And rather than saying this is how much the electric bus cost, we designed the electric bus and said, depending on the routing and the distance the electric bus drives, right, what is the size of the battery you need to look at? And if you continue to charge the battery for the period that the bus is used for, which is the life cycle of a bus, typically 12 to 15 years, the cost of electric buses are significantly lower than the internal combustion engine at the end of the day. And this is close to $3,500 to $10,000, right? A significant saving you can look at. So it's not just the first costs that are almost coming to the parity with the internal combustion engine, but even without that right now, we can look at that as a total cost of ownership as a very important factor, right? And the total cost of ownership of electric vehicles are undoubtedly much lesser than the internal combustion engine. So that's the key aspect of considering the cost as a key factor, but looking at the cost from the perspective of the total cost of ownership. I'll try to wrap up with another 2 slides. This is again 6-7 years of research and experience and data analysis coming into 2 slides and giving you some deployment trends that are happening. I remember for the first time I presented at the India Smart Utilities Week in 2016 we had a training session, and I remember 6 people showed up. 6 or 7 people showed up for that training. That was a time when the electric mobility national, electric mobility mission, everything was just getting started. India was getting excited about the electric vehicle, but the people were not excited. But now to see all of you being here and talking about electric mobility, the ministers, the utilities, the entire industry coming together and talking about it, it's a great pleasure to see how much we have come between 2016 to where we are in 2021, even under the pandemic conditions. So talking about that, where we have come, where the world has been, and what is happening, right? So we have seen that the entire environmental and sustainability objective, the policy support are very critical, and they are driving the electricity vehicle adoption, right? The COP21, the need to really go into decarbonization mode, and for the reasons I mentioned earlier, electric transportation has to be on the forefront of that decarbonization goal. Otherwise, we together will not get there. Even India cannot get there. Your nationally determined contribution NDCs cannot get there without transportation electrification, right? But don't look at just as the the low, the 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, or medium duty vehicles, or like 4-wheelers, cars, as the only electrification. There is a significant amount of heavy duty trucks, air, in case of India, buses plays a very critical role in electrification. So if you want to look at beyond just looking at cars or 3-wheelers, we need to start looking at the entire infrastructure of the transportation beyond this. And in India, I think the low-hanging fruit is the public transportation, because this is where the government and the state level governments and the central level governments can come and talk about enabling public transportation and electrification of public transportation. It's a very, very great opportunity for India. It's a priority for India to be able to do that, and that will set a trend for other people to follow. The other one is, although we have seen data, and I showed you some of the data, not a lot of data, it does increase the demand. And it's not just about the demand in an average over a period of time. It's at that instantaneous demand. So when everybody comes home and plugs in their electric vehicles, that is very critical when the demand happens, okay? But it also reduces the demand for oil, right? Because you're charging electricity as opposed to filling in the petrol. So that also reduces well-to-wheel greenhouse gas emissions. So it's very important to understand that. And in India pays a significant subsidy for oil imports. If I understand my math correctly last time, around $80 to $90 billion annually in oil subsidies. And imports. So this is a critical aspect for me, and the energy security as well for India, particularly, especially considering a lot of oil is imported in India. And I mentioned this, and this is an area that I work very closely, that integrating electric vehicles with power system is very critical. You can't look at power systems, electric vehicles, or charging infrastructure as independent. You need to look them as together, because integrating them can benefit both and help you grow more renewable energy, okay? The last one, I think, is also very critical to understand, that growing the battery electric vehicles bring in the convergence of technology, business, and offers new service opportunities, right? Karnataka is the IT capital of India, or Bangalore is the IT capital of India. If you look at the opportunities that can be created in terms of the software, in terms of the infrastructure that can be used to really bring in the electric vehicle, electric mobility, and enabling new apps and new services, innovation to foster, the opportunities are endless in terms of what could be happening with electric vehicles. So this is a great opportunity, not just electrification of cars or 2-wheelers, it's the enabling of innovation for the entire community and the ecosystem. It becomes very critical, whether it's electric utilities, software manufacturers, electric vehicle manufacturers, or grid operators, etc. So I think that is very critical to understand, that the ecosystem growth can happen significantly. As a last slide, if you have to consider some of the key regulatory considerations from US experience, you can see on the right, Karnataka, of course, was the first state to have electric vehicle policy. That's a great start, but not the end, right? We have seen a lot of other states in India also, adopting different policies and offering subsidies for EV purchase. And that's again coming from the Bloomberg analysis and data on the right. But if you have to look from the US perspective and look at some of the key regulatory consideration that could be looked at, one is incentives to purchase EVs and install charging infrastructure becomes very critical. In fact, the United States is now talking about increasing the $7,500 per electric car federal subsidies to close to $15,000 an electric car, it's $12,500 an electric car. If that happens, 1/3 of the cost of electric car is going to be covered by the subsidies. And that will not only bring it to the parity or even lower the parity against internal combustion engine vehicles. And the charging infrastructure, how do you enable charging infrastructure and provide subsidies or encourage, have BESCOM be encouraged to install charging infrastructure is a very important aspect. And we also require, especially in states like California, when the charging infrastructure is paid by the ratepayers' money, they have communication and smart capabilities. And the reason for this is to enable smart functionalities so that allows vehicles to charge in a way that is beneficial to the grid and to the consumers. Okay? So that capability allows you to, I would say, future-proof that charging infrastructure to be used as a means to communicate and manage remotely, but also manage, alleviate the grid impacts. The last one is demonstration is critical, right? So India, this is where India really lacks, is a large-scale demonstration to really understand what are some of the bottlenecks, what are the difference, how can we increase deployment, how can we reduce the cost. In US, we do a lot of pilots, research project to really understand the impact. So that demonstration has to exist in India to be able to kind of understand the issues and challenges so before they can be scaled, big time. And I spoke about the TOU rates, the dynamic pricing rates, especially the demand response activities is key in enhancing the smart charging features as well as some of the grid benefits. There are also sub-metering standards. We talk about different standards in electric vehicles on the interoperability perspective. How do you meter those, and make it very easy for metering integration with the utility system and third-party systems, and how those third-party systems and new technology service provider can provide more, services and accessibility to those time of use rates and dynamic tariff is very critical. Reggie mentioned about the India Electricity Act and how it was a kind of a detriment in enabling charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. So enabling, but sub-metering standards also plays a very critical role in measuring and ensuring there is an accurate amount of electricity use and that can be built. And the mandatory building codes. California is mandating that new constructions, especially residential and some commercial parking facilities, should have default capabilities for electric vehicle charging. So by doing so, what you do is you lower the cost of installation because it's always less expensive to install it during the construction itself, but also encourage electric vehicle adoption. So you can see the value of charging infrastructure, right? That is very critical to encourage people to drive electric vehicles. And I would like to kind of leave one big thought is, with Karnataka being the capital of IT, and now the first state to be adopting the EV policy, Karnataka can also lead the deployment of connected EV system. So I'm really going to be very proud to say that, I was part of this process, and I hope Karnataka is successful in its mission of electric mobility. That was my last slide. Thank you. Dhanyavadagalu.
Thank you very much, Girish, and that was wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody. We are running late because we started late. So I have a presentation which will go for, it can go for a full day, it can go for half an hour also, but I will try to finish it in 10-15 minutes. I see less number of people and I also wonder how many of you are really related to the EV and charging business. If more people are not related to that, then there is no much point in my explaining it. The recording and the slides will be available to all the participants. So many of these things I talked about in the morning. Some of those key facts I have talked about it. Plug-in hybrid vehicles started again in 2000s, and lithium-ion battery started with Tesla in 2008, 2009. So most people consider it as 2010 as the rebirth of electric vehicles. Batteries require DC. Some of the fundamentals which many of you know, but often forget about it. So that's what I like to bring in here. So all electric vehicles have a electric motor, and electric motor used in 99% of the electric vehicles today are AC motor. And the batteries require DC. So you need DC for charging the battery, and you need AC for running the motor, and what you get from the grid is AC power. So AC to DC conversion, it happens while you charging. The batteries is given DC power to charge. Electricity is stored as DC in the battery, and it is converted through power electronics to AC and given to the AC motor, AC induction motor. That is the process which happens in all electric vehicles. Oh. Can you give me a mic? From here I can read that. If I turn back, then people can't hear me. So I want to, yeah. So as I said, the batteries require DC power, which is supplied through AC from the grid, which is converted to DC by an AC-DC converter on the vehicle. Most of the electric vehicles, they have an onboard AC-DC converter, and typically we try to keep the capacity of that AC-DC converter to the smallest as possible because of weight, cost factors. So if you have a vehicle with a, say, 30 kilowatt hour battery, and it has only a 3 kilowatt AC-DC converter, the maximum DC output from the AC-DC converter going to the battery is 3 kilowatt. Irrespective of the capacity of the charger you have outside, it takes 10 hours to charge. And another way of charging is DC charger, DC fast charger which you have. The grid power is converted into DC in the charger itself, and DC is directly given to the battery. So in that process, it depends on the battery chemistry, how fast it can absorb the electrons. So I'll come to a couple of slides which are there. So all batteries cannot be fast charged. Most of the old vehicles which are here, the Riva and the Mahindra Electric, they all have batteries which require, it's called C rate of a battery, which is called 1 hour. If you can charge a battery, it is called 1C. If a battery needs 2 hours to charge, it is 0.5 C, not 2C. If it is 2C, you can charge it in 30 minutes. And most of the batteries in the EVs today which are there are all 0.3 or 0.5 C batteries. And the Kona, which is introduced last year, the Hyundai Kona, that has a 1C battery. The latest versions of Apple 11 onwards, what you have, the iPhone, those have 2C batteries. In 25 to 30 minutes, you can fully charge. Those are 2C batteries. So irrespective of the power I give from my AC, the DC fast charger, even if it is 50 kilowatt, but I have a battery which is only 0.5 C, that will take 2 hours to charge. So these are the fundamentals which one need to understand. And the BMS is also written such a way that battery chemistry and the ambient temperature. While charging, the cells can go very hot. If that happens, there can be fire. And lithium-ion fire you cannot extinguish. There is no technology to extinguish. You have to allow it to burn out. It can take 2 hours, it can take 2 days, it can take 2 weeks, depending on the size of the battery and the kind of fire it happens. So at times you think there is no fire. People go nearer to a vehicle which caught fire. And after half an hour, it will again start exploding and firing. So that's a very risky business. So in most of the cars and buses, battery is kept in a cooled chamber. So it is a 25, 27, 28 degree. It's kept well below 30 degrees centigrade. But when it comes to three-wheeler and two-wheeler, it's a very risky to have batteries which are not tolerant because thermal runway is not good. So another word which you often hear, and also in this presentation and other presentations, is EVSE. For some reason, somebody started calling a EV charging point as a electric vehicle supply equipment, EVSE. So this is the word which industry has accepted. So EVSE, it's a supply equipment. So when you go forward, he talked about it, so I wouldn't get into much of it, but compared to the gasoline engine, it is much cheaper to run an electric vehicle. So when you come to, this is also Girish has covered how many vehicles are there and what's happening. So let's come straight to Indian scenario. So in 2013, Government of India launched a electric vehicle mission plan. As part of it, FAME program was launched in 2015. Some 500 odd electric buses, grant was given to 500 odd electric buses. Unfortunately, all this initiative started from Bangalore, but Bangalore still don't have electric buses. So some 100 bus order was placed some 2015 or 16, and then the successive government came and they cancelled it. Unfortunately, that's one of the very rare incidents which happened. And now under the FAME 2, Karnataka got more than 500 electric buses grant, and BMTC is sometime in November or October last year, you're getting placed order. Yeah, you're getting buses now under that. So the total public charging stations as of now, or the latest number which you have, is somewhere around 1400 in India. Here again, it's just numbers and statistics. You can see one of the important things which I told is about the lithium-ion prices. Even in 2010, it was $1,191 per kilowatt hour. It has 135, 137, and expected to be well below 100 by 2025. So many of these numbers you hear in different reports, different places. This I presented in the morning. So almost all major auto manufacturers, they have a plan to produce electric vehicles in big way. Some of them 100% EV, some of them 50% EVs in the next 3 to 5 years. And even the MI, the electronic company, they are going to spend on $10 billion on making a new car manufacturing, electric vehicle manufacturing plant. So this is, as I said, there is a electric motor, that's a traction motor, which require electricity, and which comes from the battery through power electronics as AC. And there's a charging or onboard charger, which I told you that when you charge AC charging, when you do onboard charger, that convert AC into DC and supply to the battery. And there is a DC to DC converter in all the foreign automobiles, I mean, or all evolved EVs. That is for your ignition, 12 volt ignition. But some of our Indian innovation, in a way I should say it's good also, they have gone for the same lead acid battery. When you open Nexon, you can see a lead acid battery for the 12 volt, many other things. So in case your big lithium-ion battery has a fault, you will not be able to open the door, you will not be able to lower your window, nothing will work, even the light will not work. People will get trapped inside in major accidents. So that way, this is a better jihad, and you can get away from DC-DC converter. Additional, by just going for a small 12 volt lead acid battery. So these are the key components of it. You look at a induction motor weighs only 31 kilo, whereas a comparable IC engine 180 kg. So BMS is another major component. It's electronics as well as program. All this presentation will be available. Recording will be available. No need to write, but it's good to write. You will have, you will remember it more. So this controls the flow of electricity into the battery and out of the battery. Everything. When the vehicle is connected to a charger, a handshake happens. That handshake happens. Then how much charge is there left over in the battery? It's called SOC, or state of charge. A 30 kilowatt hour battery, when it comes for charging, there's already 10 kilowatt hour charge is there. 20 kilowatt is the maximum what you can put into the battery. So that handshake itself, that information is exchanged between the charger and the vehicle and the battery, and that is all facilitated through this BMS. And then only that 20 kilowatt charge, it according to the ambient temperature plus according to the battery chemistry, whether battery is 0.5 C battery or 1 C battery or 2 C battery, and the capacity of the charger. That communication happens. All the protocols are written in this BMS. And this has a typical software architecture of the BMS. I won't get into that as well. The functions which you do is the state estimation, application related functions of control, thermal management. If the ambient temperature is very high, then the charging speed, it will automatically, although I have a 2C battery, it may not charge. If the temperature in Delhi 45 degrees centigrade, if I try to charge a 2C battery, the BMS will not let it go at that. It may charge at 0.5 C or 0.7 C or something according to the battery chemistry. So protection against short circuit, overload, all these things are the performance management they do. So as I said, AC charging and DC charging. AC charging, the type 1 and type 2, which has two type of sockets which are there in 44 kilowatt. It can go maximum. Most of them are 22 kilowatt, which we use here also. And 7.4 kilowatt type 1 charger. In a middle class apartment or a middle class home where you have a 5 kilowatt electricity connection, particularly in Bangalore, you don't need air conditioner much. You can sleep without air conditioner. If you have a 5 kilowatt connection for your house, even a type 1 charging connection you take, that is 7.5 kilowatt. It's doubling. It's more than doubling your power connection to the house. So, but you may not use that much of electricity. So we have been advocating that there should be no capacity charge. If you look at your electricity bill, you are paying for different charges. Number one is the capacity charge. If you have got a 3 kilowatt connection versus a 10 kilowatt connection versus 20 kilowatt connection. So first is the capacity charge per month per kilowatt, some X rupees is billed. Then the energy charges, which is the kilowatt hour which you actually consumed. And then the reactive power, there are other charges which are built onto it. So the basic thing is that these two, the capacity charges and the energy charges. So we, to the forum of regulators, ISGF made a presentation long time back, and we said that the initial years of electric mobility, at least till 2030, we should not charge any capacity charge. We should give connection to all the charging stations, home charging, everybody, only energy charges. So Delhi was the first regulatory commission which accepted that, and there's only energy charges to be paid in Delhi. In 2017, they issued an order that 5.5 rupees will be the LT connection charges per kilowatt hour. And the following year, they reduced it further to 4.5 rupees. So many states have got, today there are 17 or 18 states where there is a separate special tariff for EV charging, which is concessional tariff everywhere. But unfortunately, some of the regulators have not understood the implication of that. They put the capacity charges. You take the BESCOM charging stations, which they have, typical charging station, they have 45 or 50 kilowatt. It's their own charging station. 50 kilowatt, normally you never charge so many cars simultaneously. You never exceed 20 or 30 kilowatt. And monthly for that 45 kilowatt, they are charged. BESCOM themselves are building their other division. And it is an underutilized capacity. That alone making the whole business unviable. Take the case of a third party coming and putting up a 100 kilowatt charging station, and that 100 kilowatt if you have to pay, and actually we are using much less. There are only 10 vehicles coming to charge in a week. And in Bombay, I have seen some of the Tata Power charging stations. There's not even one vehicle charged in a week. So we have to promote this so that if you put in this kind of a penal rates, then no private person will come and set up charging station. So the DC charging, there are three. The AC charging, why? There's no communication. You just charge whatever the BMS manages it, or how much it can take. There is no separate communication going. In DC, there are different communication going. So Shadamo means Shadi Mu, a Japanese association which has came up with EV charging standards late 1990s. So they are active for a long time. And the vehicles which are made in Japan, Korea, they follow Shadamo standards. And in GBT is the standard which is in China. And now there is a Chaoji standard, which is a collaboration between China and Japan. They are making a super fast charger, which is 1500 kilowatt. Sorry, 900 kilowatt, almost a megawatt, 900 kilowatt charger. Those standards will be available next year. But Tesla has their own supercharger. It doesn't communicate with anything else, but they have a converter. You can convert with the other. Most of the, I think I can't see one slide, very important one which is missing. Is it hidden or something? It's a CCS one slide which is, I can't find it here. Sorry, I will share it with you. So combined charging system which Europe follows. We follow European standard or IEC standards everywhere for electricity because we follow the same 220 volt 50 hertz frequency. So we adopted in India CCS combined charging system, AC and DC both on same plug as the standard for India. I have two slides on the Indian standards. And we also, when we issued the standards in BIS standards in 2018, we realized that 99% of the electric vehicles which are in India, they are partially or fully imported from China. And they follow the GBT standard. So we have allowed those vehicles to continue here. And we have the Department of Heavy Industries has issued another set of standards or specifications. We call it Bharat Charger Specifications, AC 001 and DC 001. And we also will allow when Tesla comes, Tesla supercharger. And when Government of India invited people in 2018 to come and set up car manufacturing, electric vehicle manufacturing in India, it is the Japanese and Korean companies are the one who responded. But they follow Shadamo. So in the standard, we also allowed Shadamo to coexist. So we are all much like USA, all standards coexist. The argument is that we are a big country. All this can coexist here. And what brilliantly had happened is that in last 2-3 years, all our suppliers, this was not done only 1 or 2 places in the past. You have the same charger, one gun is CCS, the other gun is Shadamo. So this is a new invention, which I won't say new invention, but commercialization happened in a big way in India. So I talked about the C rate. I won't go through it. The battery chemistries are 1C battery for the LFP, NMC, LTO, all of them. LTO is the only battery which can go up to 10C, which means 6 minutes you can fully charge a battery. That is lithium-ion titanate oxide. There are only 2-3 companies who make it in the world. It's expensive even today. That has not come to $130 rate. That's still at $400, $500 per kilowatt hour, but it has much higher rate, much higher life. Up to 20 years it will last, 15 to 20,000 cycles it gives. Whereas the other LFP, NMC, this kind of batteries which gives much lesser, 3,000-4,000 cycles, and that can go up to 2C maximum, LFP 1C. And I just, for example, I just put it a 22 kilowatt charger, AC charger, you have a 30 kilowatt hour battery, but it charges only at 0.5C. It will take 2 hours. It will take 2 hours. You have a 50 kilowatt DC charger, the same 30 kilowatt hour battery which charges at 1C, it will charge at one hour, something like that. So go through this slide, try to do that. So here, the grid electricity is given to the electric vehicle charging station, EVSE. There are many communication and other protocol standards to manage that. A grid can be managed with all the equipment connected to the grid. So we have a standard called Open ADR, and which India is adopting, and that is already adopted by IEC as 627 IEC 62746-10-1, which now last 2 months ago we made recommendation that IEC will be, sorry, Bureau of Indian Standard will be adopting. So Open ADR adopted by IEC, now BIS is adopting it, and that is the standard which we'll use for managing all the charging stations connected to the grid. Then comes the communication between the EVSE and the EV. The control center of the electric vehicle to the control center or controller of the electric car. Communication, there are two standards. We adopting ISO 15118. So it's already adopted in 2018, 2019. We adopted as it is ISO 15118, 6 volumes we issued in 2018 and 19. And then comes, how do a EV user communicate with the EV charging station and charging station operator, for which there is a standard called OCPP, Open Charge Point Protocol. This is developed by a Netherlands, a Dutch association, Open Charge Alliance. This is the most evolved standard and oldest, which has been adopted by most of the countries around the world. IEC is in the process of adopting that standard. It will come out as some 63110. Maybe it may take another year or so. In the meantime, all the vehicles, all the chargers sold in India are compliant to OCPP 1.6, and the latest ones are compliant to OCPP 2.0 as well. So we will be issuing some document from Government of India that we will adopt that pending IEC adoption. Maybe we can adopt that faster. And IEEE 2030.5 is also a very good standard. We is available, and many of the equipment are compliant to that as well. So OCPP, as I said, it's an internationally established standard developed by Open Charge Alliance, and they have, it's not proprietary, it is open to all, and it's standard based, and no royalty to be paid. Anyone can use it, and OCA and BIS was in the process of signing an MOU, but there are some delays in that. So we will be adopting that. ISO 15118 I talked about, EV communication controller to the EV SC communication controller, SECC and EVCC. So here, on the request of ISGF, Bureau of Indian Standard constituted a technical committee to draw standards for electric vehicles in 2017. This committee is ETD 51. And a lot of people, we have more than 120 members in this ETD 51, but contributing members are only less than a dozen. So we have its own challenges. In August 2018, we adopted IEC standard 62196, part 1 and part 2. We adopted that as Indian standard. We have a series called IS 17017, and part 1 was published in July 2018, and several other parts we have already published, some of them draft ready. And the pandemic and not able to meet people physically has really delayed things, but still by middle of next year, all the pending standards, the ones which are actually pending are to the connectors and cables and all that, which are very expensive. The high power connectors are very expensive if you follow the exact IEC standards. So we are trying to develop that in India, which are explained in the next slide. It's not working. Can you move to the next slide, please? Oh. Yeah, some of them are, you can see that under development. We will finish all this by middle of next year. That's what we. So ISO 2019, we issued all the 6 volumes. So I won't take more time, 2 minutes. This is the impact of EV charging on the grid. So you asked Mr. Cholan. And the beginning, as I explained, battery, you can store DC power only. There is no way to store AC power yet. The electricity can be stored as DC only. And for which from the grid, electricity need to be, AC need to be converted to DC. Whenever AC is converted to DC, those who are electrical engineers, you will understand the waveform becomes square form, and that generate harmonics and inject it back to the grid. And that can be very harmful at times. Very little studies have been done globally on the impact of harmonics on the grid. There are up to 100 harmonics. Today there are power quality meters which can measure up to 100th harmonic. And how it affects, nobody knows. 11th harmonics get neutralized by 17th harmonic, or vice versa, or at the 27th harmonic but get neutralized by 33rd harmonics. These are quite often happens. Modeling studies is very difficult. When you do a modeling study and what actually happens on the grid when you do this AC to DC conversion is very difficult. So the report which is released today, which is available already on our website, the book which was given is only one volume. There's just a second volume which is about 380 pages. Both of them can be downloaded from indiasmartgrid.org website. 12 feeders, 11 kV feeders of BESCOM, we have taken and done modeling study where this existing charging stations are connected. The current charging stations are typically 44 kilowatt. And maximum load when, if 4 vehicles are charging, 44 kilowatt charging load we are giving on that as of 2020. What would be the harmonics? What would be the impact on the distribution grid is what we try to model. We have seen in most of the feeder, there are many under voltage elements. Voltage drop happens, harmonics comes, heating happens, all that. So 12 feeders we have taken. In the first volume of the book, the details of only one feeder is given. Other 11 feeders are in the annexure, which is about 380 pages. So we have also simulated 2022, if same feeders are going to have rooftop solar, what would be the impact? We found there's some, it's good to have that at the last end of the fag end of the feeder, if there is power generation, local generation during the day, that can mitigate some negative impact. And 2025, so 2020, 2022 and 2025, 3 scenarios we studied and simulated and done. And both voltage and current harmonics will be there. And I won't go through the details of this. Please read it. There's nothing very difficult. This is the planning study. These are the 12 feeders which we had taken for the modeling study, and the different scenarios of 2020, 22 and 25 considered. The Itamadu feeder, one of them, which the detailed analysis is there in the volume 1, which is released. Some copies people can take it from our booth also, those who want hard copy. Here you see each of the year that Itamadu feeder, what we need to do. The existing distribution transformer need to be enhanced. Capacity need to be enhanced. And some places we have to put in the harmonic filters. And sizing of that you can do only by doing studies, actual studies, or installing power quality meter. So our standard recommendation to all distribution companies is that any large charging station, please insist for having a power quality meter and monitor the power quality. And what ISGF is currently doing, we have done modeling studies many places, but as I said, exactly what happens on the real grid is beyond modeling study. So we have installed 2 power quality meters, one in Pune in a bus depot where there are more than 100 buses are charging. The load is more than 10 megawatt there. So it's 120 or 130 buses are charged in that bus depot, where we have installed a very high quality imported power quality meter. And another one we have installed in Calcutta, where another bus depot where more than 20 buses are charged at night. So both this power quality meter data, it captures more than 2000 parameters of the grid. What is derived, most of them are derived. So, and it will be real-time feed. It is coming to a cloud, which we are monitoring, and with the help of experts, we will be making a monthly report. These 2 installations happened only last 2-3 months, and before the pandemic, things got delayed. And from next month onwards, our monthly update, what is exactly happening in these 2 premises. So some of the recommendation from this report is that wherever the DT need to be upgraded, solar at the periods are good at certain scenarios. So I stop here. So any questions, you are free to write to me. We'll be happy to answer. And any burning questions, I'll be happy to answer in 5 minutes. No questions. Lunch is ready. Please move to the lunch area. And we will start. What is the time now? 20. So Mr. Shashi Verma will be giving a talk on WebEx from 2:30, but we will request him to delay it by 15 minutes or 3 o'clock, half an hour.